Michelle Mindfreak was a Githyanki, life cleric of Lakith who could never directly harm enemies for fear of retribution. Instead, she got by as a skilled charlatan, lying to her superiors and intimidating her lessers. But that all changed when she was given a gift from who she thought were her sworn enemies. Now, with the ability to rend people apart with only her mind, she embarks on a heinous journey to answer the question: can a lone wolf beat Baldur's Gate 3 using Illithid powers only? But first, the rules. Rule number 1. We're only allowed to directly negatively affect enemies using Illithid powers. That means we can still positively affect creatures, including ourselves, and interact with objects and whatnot. Number 2. No other party members with their own detached portrait. Temporary companions such as Scratch are fair game, but they can't deal damage either. Number 3. No respecking. If we make mistakes with the build, we're just gonna have to live with it. Number 4. No barrelmancy. That includes chestmancy to block doorways and other such nonsense too. Number 5. No saving in the middle of combat. Every victory is to be earned the hard way. Number 6. No karmic dice. This is to make combat a more authentic D&D experience. And finally, number 7. No changing the difficulty at any point. This is a tactician run after all. As a side note, these videos take a ton of time and effort to make, so I'd really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. With that out of the way, time to start our story. Starting with character creation. As stated, we began as a Gith, life cleric of Lakith, taking guidance, resistance, and thaumaturgy as our cantrips. All 3 are important for passing skill checks and giving us free ways to gain concentration, which will be very necessary in the near future. And of course, we take charlatan as our background so we can weasel our way through conversations and get inspiration for it. Our ability scores get looking a little something like this. Focusing on wisdom, since our Illithid save DCs are the same as our spellcasting DC, while our skill proficiencies look a little bit more like this. We settle on a fitting look, complete with tentacle eyeshadow, and give our new monstrous main character a name. Time to wreak havoc, Michelle Mindfreak. We awaken on a crashing nautiloid with no real powers past our life cleric ones that we already have. All we know is one thing: we need to consume more strength, and also get out of here alive. As we're heading to the helm to take control of the ship, we're beset upon by one of our kin who underwent a similar transformation. She asks us to work together for now, and we head into our first fight. Thankfully, we're able to use our psychic powers to convince her to jump off the ship nice and quick. Unthankfully, that's it for our psionic juice, so we cast protection from evil and good on ourselves and watch as our foes miss attack after attack. Since we can't harm them, we lure them up to a not quite hostile intellect devour and let our cranial pal finish off the fools who chased us this whole way. After that, we manage to get to the helm where a 2-team tussle is going on between fiends and what will soon become Illithids. There's little we can do to help our future form for now though, so we hustle on over to the control panel and have our first tentacular taste of teleportation to get out of dodge, causing the nautiloid to come crashing down onto a beach, and thanks to our beginning transformation, we managed to land safe and sound. The next morning, we wake up ready to find more tadpoles to consume, as we've already got a hankering for power. During Michelle's exploration, we hear what sounds like foes in the distance and just to be safe cast Sanctuary on ourselves. Sure enough, a moment later, a pack of goblins and wargs show up to fight with the residents of this here druid grove. We do our best to keep the ones not trying to murder us alive, but it doesn't go great for them at all. But while they're dying, we just use our Githyanki mage hand to pop open the gate and start heading inside. The last of our men on the ground go down as we make it to safety, and from here we just spam the horn up top to give our remaining thrall Zevlor a bit of temp HP each turn while he whittles away at all the remaining foes one by one. As he takes down the last goblin, he also tells his people to open the gate so we can all get inside, but I mean, buddy, there's only one of us here and we're already inside. Regardless, watching those folks kill each other gave us enough XP for level 2. With this level up, we take a dip into Rogue to further hone Ms. Mindfreak's dastardly instincts, and because we really want an extra bonus action once we hit level 3 in this class. We get sneak attack at this level, which we can't use, and more importantly gain a new skill proficiency for which we choose intimidation, and expertise in 2 skills for which we take deception and intimidation so that we can talk our way past most threats. As we enter the grove proper, we find tensions are rising crazy high between the druids and tieflings who are inhabiting this place, but the druids are nice enough to recognize our authority and allow us to pass and speak to someone who knows more about our unique powers. Instead, we find Nettie, who doesn't know jack about what's going on, but she does give us some free poison and takes us into her office where we grab our first Mind Flater parasite. Not that we can use it yet, but soon our master plan will come together. Our psychic protagonist also gets her first item power up here in the grove from everyone's fave wizard Volo, the Whispering Promise. This little ring makes it so whenever we heal a creature, ourselves included, included, they get the benefits of Bless for 2 turns. That's an extra 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws. While the attack roll bonus doesn't matter too much, the boost to our saving throws is fantastic, especially since we'll be healing constantly, so we'll keep this one on for quite a while. And to further show off just how quick we're improving after making a single performance check, we gain the ability to play every instrument known to mortal kind. If that ain't psychic powers, I don't know what is. From here, we set off in search of a way to put our powers to use, and along the way we meet Raphael, who seems to be under the misconception that we want our tadpole removed, so we tell him to bugger off and move along, though if he keeps this up we might just have to deal with him later. Further down the road, we encounter a small group of folks with one of them dying on the ground. It's here we learn we can use our powers to exert authority over certain folks in something called the Cult of the Absolute. After their brother dies, we tell him to clear off and use our psychic abilities to absorb another parasite that was lurking inside of him, still with no way to use them. Michelle keeps searching, using our authority to get inside a goblin-infested village and finding the Haste Helm. This Noggin Protector makes it so at the start of combat we gain momentum for 3 turns, which grants 1.5 meters of move speed per turn remaining, essentially granting us an extra positioning boost at the start of fights. Nothing too wild, but it's the best we'll get for this act, so we'll wear it for a little while. Continuing on, we head west towards the goblins' main camp and do what we have to do to get inside, which also coincidentally gives us enough experience for level 3 and our 2nd level in Rogue. This grants us cunning actions which let us dash, disengage, or hide as a bonus action. Nothing mind-blowing on paper, but in practice these boost our survivability by an insane amount. On top of that, we gain enhanced sleep once per long rest thanks to our racial traits for a nice little extra boost. And right as we're about to step into the goblin camp, we get hit by a brutal headache and hear a commanding voice in our heads telling us about a handsome younger man with a quick, easy smile. Oh boy, I can't wait to meet him. Now that this cutscene is triggered, all we need to do is take a nap, and when we awake we can finally consume our parasites we've been collecting and unlock some Illithid powers. We start off by taking our main source of damage for this run, Concentrated Blast, as well as Psionic Backlash. Concentrated Blast can be used once per turn so long as we're concentrating on a spell, and deals a guaranteed 3d6 psychic damage to one nearby target at the cost of our concentration. In addition, if our target is concentrating on a spell, we also heal equal to the damage dealt. This ability is why we got concentration cantrips. Psionic Backlash lets us, as a reaction when an enemy nearby casts a spell, deal 1d4 psychic damage per spell level that's being casted. This also procs before the spell goes through, so if we can kill an enemy with it, it completely negates their spell. Both powerful pickups that let us deal actual damage. Once inside the goblin camp, we meet Priestess Gut, who gives us a nice little brand to mark us as one of the gang before telling us she wants to have a little chat with us in her private chambers. We head straight there and take a celebratory swig to our new friendship, and oh man, I'm feeling kinda woozy. Michelle wakes up imprisoned and in a bit of a bind, but that gets sorted out pretty quick with the help of this stranger who dips immediately after getting Gut in the cutscene. The Gut scene. After Gut gets got, we grab her tadpole and pop that straight into Cull the Weak. This makes it so whenever we bring a creature's hit points below the amount of unlocked Illithid powers that we have, they instantly die and everyone nearby takes 1d4 psychic damage. This is maybe the second most important ability we'll ever get, as it is so much effective damage on top of turning every enemy into a walking bomb. Then we head back to the Blighted Village where we scare off some goblins for easy XP as well as free the poor gnome they were torturing. Before heading north towards the mountain pass where we encounter some of our kin, and I definitely didn't select the wrong dialogue option and get instantly one-shot, but instead I simply told them that we don't have what they want and they clear off, leaving behind even more XP. Afterwards we head just to the east where we sneak up on some gnolls and cast Sanctuary on ourselves, causing combat to start and their leader to immediately run up to have a quick telepathic chat with us. Turns out she's been infected too, so we exert our authority over her and she turns on her own pals. She still gets her canine caboose absolutely clobbered though, but that was the goal of Michelle's plot all along. Now we can just grab her parasite no problem, and with the help of our cunning actions and Sanctuary, we just zip far away and flee combat. Once back in camp, we unlock Force Tunnel, which is a short-range dash that can be used once per short rest and pushes everything in our path away from us. But here's the kicker, there's no saving throw against this. I didn't realize this at first, but it is guaranteed to push, which means if used correctly, we can do some crazy stuff, but we'll save that for later. Now that we've got a decent chunk of powers, we head back to the goblin camp and intimidate this guy into hitting us, and then intimidate him while he's hitting us, which results in us getting Leviatar's Love, a permanent buff that grants +2 to attacks and saving throws well below 30% HP. The attack part is useless, but hey, you never know when a boost to saves will come in handy. Then we head next door to free Volo, cause even Michelle can't resist this wily wizard's wit, and he tells us he'll meet us at camp where he can pick our parasite-riddled brain in peace. Hopefully not literally. From there, we head to the back of Gut's chambers where we descend into the Underdark via ladder, and atrocious villain or not, we deserve more efficient means of travel than this thing. And right next to where we pop out underground, we find a funky fungal town wherein we meet Omeluum, one of our future kin who offers to extract our tadpole. Upon learning it can't be done though, instead he tells us of a potion he can make that should have some effect on it. We get the feeling our parasite is extra sturdy though, so curious as to what this potion will do to us, we set out to gather the ingredients. Our search leads us to a nearby arcane tower, and thanks to the help of a Featherfall scroll, we can hop down to the garden at its base easy peasy, where we grab a Susser Bloom which we can use to disable the tower's security measures. And this grants enough experience for level 4 and our 3rd level in Rogue, getting our subclass for which we choose Thief. A Thief gives us resistance to falling damage, and far more importantly, an extra bonus action, every turn for free. That means extra healing, extra dashing, and later on even extra Illithid powers, definitely worth the 3-level dip. Once we're inside the tower proper, we grab both the ingredients we were sent here for and hop on back to our tentacled friend. After chugging the foul-tasting potion and making a couple relatively easy saving throws, our parasite becomes more powerful than ever before, as it turns out the age-old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, was indeed correct. This grants us the survival instinct power, once per short rest, which lets us target one creature, and if that creature falls to 0 hit points in the next 3 turns, they would instead regain 3d4 hit points. Kind of a last-ditch move, but better than nothing. Since we seem to be in the mood for putting our brain through a blender, we have that long-awaited chat with Volo, and it turns out he did mean it literally. Very literally. And there goes one of our eyes. But hey, Volo is smart enough to not get on a future world-dominating villain's bad side, and nice enough to give us an upgrade, a new eye that lets us see invisible things before scampering off into the horizon. Time to finally clean up that filthy emerald grove we encountered earlier. We meet up with one of the goblin leaders, Minthara, who's struggling to find it, and tell her all about where it is. She comes up with the devious idea to have us open the gate since we have their trust, and she heads out to go get in position. Only problem is all these leaders have parasites that we want, and since there's one left in camp, we might as well take him out. Let's go meet Dror Ragzlin. We get into his throne room where he's got quite the audience, but thanks to our ability to play 6 songs perfectly, we start whistling a hell of a jig that lures everyone around up to the edge of the giant spider pit. Once Michelle's got him where we want him, we flip on turn-based mode and blast a good chunk of them, including Dror, into the pit with a force tunnel, and, well, we picked a fight. The consequences are hardly surprising. Consequences being that we get shoved into the pit at the exact same time the rest of the camp joins the fray. At least Dror is half health. Thankfully, Michelle's got a potion of flying to get us out of our lowest moment, physically speaking. We spend the rest of our turn dashing to get up to the rafters and gain some lightning charges thanks to our temporary boots, the Speedy Light feat, and put some distance on the troubles below. On their turn, our arachnid allies do some damage to Mr. Ragzlin, and he obliterates them on his. Our fighting style begins to take shape here as we use Psionic Backlash to do a bit of damage whenever we can to any spellcasters. Then, on our turn, we disengage and dash to move as far out of the way as we can and use our action to either concentrate or blast, which Michelle really likes, or cast one of our concentration cantrips depending on whether or not we're currently concentrating. Side note real quick, resistance is definitely the better cantrip to cast as it actually boosts any concentration checks we need to make, but I mixed up what it does and used guidance for the most part in these early fights. The enemies mostly miss us or fail to reach us entirely, while Dror and his goons finish off the last spider. The main problem with this build right now is just the fact that it takes 2 turns to do any real damage, but we are able to keep our health topped up by using concentrated blast on enemies with active spells, healing us equal to the damage we deal. Still, it's extremely slow going and we don't even have guaranteed kills with each blast, and on occasion we've got to top up our hit points with some healing potions. Dror also manages to make it out of the enclosure that he was trapped in, and as his goons are all running out, a million more join the fight. Realizing this fight would take forever if we focus on every little goon, we decide to start using hit and run strats on the big man specifically. And when we get in a really tight bind, we make good use of Sanctuary to buy us a couple turns to reposition and heal up. After what feels like an eternity of kiting and careful positioning and hitting Dror when we can, which isn't always since good old Sea Blast has a short range, we finally manage to take him out and grab his parasite. Only to find out you get an amount of parasites equal to the surviving goblin leaders after raiding the Druid Grove. Well, nothing to do for it now that he's dead as a drawer nail. Michelle casts Sanctuary on herself and just walks away, at least asserting herself as the superior villain if nothing else. Using his parasite, we unlock Repulsor, which can be used once per short rest and deals 2d6 force damage, and if enemies fail a save, they can also get pushed back 6 meters for some more battlefield manipulation and not bad AoE damage. We take a long rest to get our resources back and get ready for, well, choosing the wrong option and getting instantly one-shot again. That's a bad habit I've gotta shake. But after that, we cast cast Sanctuary on ourselves and sound the horn to signal Minthara's goblin horde to initiate the raid. To dig the dagger in deeper, we pop open the gate and see Zevlor's sweet reaction to our betrayal, but there's not a thing he can do at this point. As we cackle evilly, the tieflings get slaughtered all around us, and much to their chagrin, they can't touch us thanks to Sanctuary, but we can still keep blowing the horn to give all our allies temp HP every single round. And to finish our betrayal, we land the final blow on Zevlor ourselves with Psionic Backlash, and as soon as he hits the ground, he is as good as forgotten. Zevlor who? Michelle continues our onslaught deeper in the grove alongside Minthara, and we play support in this fight for the most part too. Though we do get the odd concentrated blast in, we're mostly just watching our gal pal wreck shop and throwing healing potions at her to keep her in tip-top shape. Once again though, the last laugh and blow go to us. God, that is satisfying. I can see why Michelle makes all these weird noises. And with the front and second lines of defense dealt with, time to deal with the innocents hiding away. Just after Repulsor's 5-second delay. Now it's time to finish off the druids, which honestly isn't too hard since if they get too close we can just disengage and run away with an extra dash if we need to. Especially with the help of our explosion-inclined friends nearby, and dare I say, a good couple concentrated blasts as well. We relay the evil news to Minthara and she is just as stoked about it as we are, and gives us a parasite which we use to unlock Psionic Overload, which once per short rest makes our attacks deal 1d4 extra psychic damage for 10 turns at the cost of taking 1d4 psychic at the end of each of our turns. Michelle doesn't deal attack damage though, so this is pretty useless past increasing Call the Weak's threshold and getting us further in the ability tree. Our Grove raiding comrade also tries to murder us in the night, but after proving ourselves the superior Dami Mommy, we get another parasite which we use to unlock Stage Fright. This is a pretty good AoE ability that once per short rest gives enemies disadvantage on attack rolls and makes them take 2d6 psychic on every missed attack for 3 turns, assuming they fail a wisdom save. Now that Michelle has slaughtered the Grove, we're safe to head off to the mountain pass, where we've heard some of our kin are lurking, and along the way we get this cool Rubik's Cube that just appears in our pocket. Once there, we meet Lady Esther, who sells us our next item upgrade, the Periapt of Wound Closure, which maximizes the amount of hit points we heal from any source we heal from. That includes potions, spells, you name it, which is especially nice for the little life cleric in us. After that, we take a scenic gondola ride down to the nearby temple, break inside with a couple whacks, and show some Gith goons our cool Rubik's Cube, which apparently their leader is looking for, and they let us inside their creche. We head straight to the lab and find exactly what we were hoping for, 3 more parasites and a way to bully the one in our head a little bit more. With a quick chat with the doctor in the lab, she lets us hop inside the Zaithisk and begins to torture our mental mate. But we know this routine by now. After a few good saves, our tadpole is only empowered by the process, just as we had hoped, powerful enough even to destroy the Zaithisk. Michelle might look rough right now, but we just gained the ability to use all of our Illithid powers as a bonus action instead of an action. Finally, we can deal damage in 1 turn of combat. The 3 tadpoles we had picked up earlier get used to unlock Favorable Beginnings, Transfuse Health, and Shield of Thralls. Favorable Beginnings makes it so the first attack or check we make against anything gains a bonus equal to our proficiency. The attack part is useless, but the ability to check part is real nice for conversations and interactions. Transfuse Health is entirely useless since it lets us sacrifice half our remaining health to heal something else for the same amount, but at least it helps call the weak. And it lets us get Shield of Thralls, which once per short rest lets us give something a shield for 10 temp HP, and when that temp HP is lost, the shield explodes, forcing an intelligence save on any baddies nearby, and should they fail, they get stunned. And now it's time to give our new powers a whirl. We pop on our shield and get blasting on a room full of sleeping kobolds. And god, is it nice to be able to deal damage in 1 turn with resistance and concentrated blast one after another. Thanks to Call the Weak, we're also able to one-shot most of these low health enemies too. What would have taken us maybe 4 turns before, we're now getting done in 1. We do still generally save 1 bonus action to dash away and keep our distance from the baddies. Once we get surrounded outside, it's the perfect time to hit them with the repulsor, which also sets off a bunch of Call the Weak and obliterates most of the enemies and leaves the remainder on death's door. It's not long after where we finish off the last of them with a brain blast. Oh, and one of them burns to death thanks to their buddies. But either way, a phenomenal first showing for our new powers. Anyone foolish enough to oppose us is in for a rough time. To reward ourselves for a slaughtering well done, we head to everyone's favorite Ajaknir Jira in the creche to buy the Defender Flail and Vital Conduit boots. Now, obviously we can't swing the flail, but it does give us +1 to our AC and reduces all incoming physical damage by 1 just for holding it, which is phenomenal. And the Vital Conduit boots give us even more survivability, granting 8 temp HP every time we start concentrating, and since we cast a concentration spell every single turn, we also gain 8 temp HP every turn. There's still some more power to be found across the lake in the Underdark though, so we head there and get ganked by some Dwergar that make the mistake of trying to boss us around, so a fight breaks out. It's a little bit rough since we get surprised and they conjure up a bajillion zombies, zombies, but once we actually do get a turn, we hit him with the old dash disengage, getting up to some high ground and healing up with a potion. This forces all the baddies to dash to us, and when it's back to Michelle, we start poking them down while using one bonus action to dash away and kite them. The undead fortitude the zombies have is quite annoying, making it take some extra blasts to kill them, and on occasion we do get surrounded and have to disengage. We eventually manage to lure one of the devious Dwergar over to a cliff alongside a bunch of unruly undead and go for a repulsor to get them. Unfortunately it fails, but Force Tunnel is not so forgiving, and that's one Dwergar done. The others manage to catch up to us eventually and start bullying us with blindness, as well as counterspelling our cantrips, which is just plain rude. To wait out the blindness, we drop a sanctuary on ourselves and get into a better position. Thankfully, one of them makes the mistake of concentrating on Hunter's Mark, so we get a heal off of our Brain Blast to break our sanctuary, followed up by a stage fright on a good few of them, including the Archer, who immediately starts burning away their hit points by shooting at us right before we get blinded yet again. And on top of that, Get Cole continues to be a nuisance with upcasted Rays of Sickness and counterspelling our cantrips, making it so we decide to just wait out the blindness and heal up with another sanctuary. Once we're feeling ready, we break it with another Brain Blast on one of the Dwergar, only to get hit by a brutal guiding bolt in return. On our next go around though, we manage to heal from blasting the Archer and finish them off in one fell swoop. With one damage source out of the way, it's a lot easier to face tank spells, especially when one foe insists on concentrating, making it nice and easy for us to heal up. Only a few turns later and the cleric goes down too, leaving the big man himself as the only threat. So we just kinda stand there and trade blasts against each other until eventually he runs out of spell slots and just screams at someone to arrest us while we blast him down bit by bit until he too goes down. And we take care of his reanimated rejects just a moment later. After that showing, I think this might be like an actual decent build. We never really struggled during that fight, even with the surprise round. Now that they're out of the way, we yoink their boat and set sail across the lake, and as soon as we arrive on the other side, we learn tensions are high between the Dwergar and the absolute cult leader stationed here. And arriving here also grants us enough experience for level 5 and level 2 in Cleric. This grants us access to our Channel Divinity, which recharges on short rest and can be used for Preserve Life, which is an action that heals us and our allies for 3 life per our character level, not class level, so right now this is 15. We also gain Misty Step once per long rest from our racial traits, which is a very handy little thing to be able to do in tight spots. And to top it off, our proficiency bonus goes up to +3 at this level as well for an all-around boost. Continuing on, tensions are indeed high as we eavesdrop on some Dwergar plotting against their leader, and Michelle starts to form a plot. We convince them we're on their side, and they say if we free Nier, the head honcho from a cave-in, they'll jump him as soon as he gets out. We agree, but first we've got to take out the scrying eye, so we lure it over to the edge and while no one's looking, blast it off with a force tunnel. Problem solved. Looks like there's some chests down where we knocked it though, so we go take a look and oh no, oh god, they were mimics. And good lord, mimics that hurt a lot. How many crits do these guys need? But we figure out we can cheese them pretty easily by just heading up to the top of this cliff. And whenever we want to damage them, just make the long crawl down to blast them, before disengaging to climb back up and repeat the whole process. All it takes is a small eternity of blasting them down, and long after you know it, they're all dealt with. From their ruined carcasses, we grab the Wondrous Gloves, which are definitely meant for bards, but either way they still give us an extra +1 to our AC, further increasing our defense. Since we've got a bit more defense, it's time to blow up the cave-in and free Nier. He comes sauntering out and instantly shoves a slave into the lava, and hey, that kinda gives me an idea. But first, some of the Dwergar revolt, thanks to our meddling, and we side with Nier, as our plot to get a reward from him comes to fruition. There's really not much we need to do to win this fight, especially since our new drow friend can mind control enemies, but the problem is we want the fight to be somewhat close, so we resort to healing and buffing up the enemies to hopefully make them last longer. They take out a couple of the folks on our side, but it really doesn't last long at all. As a little treat, Nier gives us a parasite which we use to unlock Perilous Stakes. This can be used once per long rest to make a creature vulnerable to all damage, but they heal 2d8 every time they land an attack for 3 turns, should they fail an int save. A nice little way to gain an extra bit of damage for a few turns. But our secret scheme isn't over yet. You see, Nier himself has a parasite that we want, so we take a page out of his book and repulse him straight into the lava to start up another fight. We get hit by some pretty heavy blows before we even get a turn, so we instantly go into Sanctuary to heal up and reposition as usual. Once ready, we test out Perilous Stakes on Nier, and it works, removing his resistance to psychic damage before we hit him with a blast of our own. And to keep them at a distance, we engage the old chitin machine thanks to our extra bonus action while mixing in some blasts. In just a couple turns, the scummy slave driver is gone for good, and we get all his sweet loot. Doesn't take long to take out the rest of all of his goons too, with all of them taking no more than a few blasts, and thanks to our insane survivability between AC and temp HP, they can't do much to us. After our evil plan is played out and we've had a good maniacal cackle, we unlock our last power for this act, Displace. A passive that makes it so any enemy that takes falling damage because of us also takes an extra 1d8 psychic. Not the most impressive, but hey, more damage is more damage. Before we continue on deeper into the forge, we head back to the Myconid colony to resupply and we tell them about our recent exploits, whereupon they give us the most vile nickname. Ugh. As well as Bliss Spores, which grant us an extra 1d6 on pretty much everything until our next long rest. Since we're a bit more prepared to take on what awaits us deeper in, we grab a couple molds to use in the forge, as well as some ore. Then we head down to the forge proper, where we pop in the ingredients, and since I forgot to rest before the Bliss Spores, we use our last spell slot and go in with Sanctuary, Resistance, Mage Hand, and a Hill Giant Elixir active, and we hit the lava valve. What comes pouring out isn't just lava though, but also Grim, the Guardian of the Forge, a real tough cookie who just so happens to also be immune to psychic damage. Thankfully, Michelle has no qualms about interacting with objects, so on our first turn we send our Mage Hand near the hammer lever and hop our way to the opposite side of the arena, as well as cast Jump in case we need it in future rounds. Unfortunately, Grim has it out for our Mage Hand and meanders over towards it instead of us, and the round after that completely walks over the center and the lava disappears. We spend our turns waiting by casting Shield of Thralls on ourselves while we fiddle about with our Mage Hand and finally get Grim into position. The hammer comes crashing down on Grim as we shoot the lever, and a bunch of the only villains more heinous than Michelle come pouring out of the woodworks. Magma Mephits. But with a good repulsor, we manage to take out all except one of them in one fell swoop. And when the survivor makes the mistake of casting Heat Metal, we get it with the old psionic backlash called the weak combo. Our next turn we spend our action spinning the valve to bring the lava back, which Grim does not take too kindly, knocking us prone and dealing a bunch of damage despite all of our bonuses to strength saves. Michelle is a resilient gal though, so on her next turn we dash and do a couple of hops to get to the other side of the arena, causing Grim to take the bait perfectly and stop in the center. At the same time, the lava disappears again. I could have sworn it used to stick around longer. Regardless, we get him with another hammer crush, dealing another big chunk of damage, and we heal up with a potion. And since the cruel construct wastes its turn standing up, we just shoot the valve to bring back the lava on our next turn, as well as use survival instincts on ourselves just in case. The big guy gets us with another stomp as our strength saves are really letting us down, but we do the classic dash and jump to the other side in an attempt to lure Grim to the center. It works perfectly, as all of Michelle's masterful plans do, but as the hammer falls one more time, Grim lives with 16 HP, which just means we gotta rinse and repeat one more time. Spin the lava valve, get stomped on, Misty Step away since our jump spell ran out, lure him straight to the center, and get him with one last hammer fall. Hasta la vista, Grim, and good riddance. Defeating the ruinous robot was not without ample reward though, as we get the adamantine splint and adamantine shield by using the forge. The splint has an AC of 18, reduces all damage we take by 2, makes us immune to crits, and to top it off when a melee attack hits us, the person who did it gets sent reeling for 3 turns, reducing their chance to hit by 1 per turn remaining. The shield similarly gives us immunity to crits, but much more importantly makes it so when a melee attack misses us, the attacker gets sent reeling for 2 turns, which only makes them more likely to miss again. An insane defensive combo that should help us get through some tough fights to come. Now that we're kitted up, we're back to the surface, where we find some young men arguing with an old woman, and Michelle, never one to pass up the chances to slaughter some innocents, makes short work out of them. The lady says if we swing by her place, she'll give us a proper reward, so we start heading to Auntie's house. Once there though, we find out she's torturing the sister of those fellas we just took care of, so to drive it in deeper, we tell the girl what we did, and she doesn't seem to take that news too well, oddly enough. Unfortunately, this does piss off the lady, who reveals herself to be a hag, and a fight starts as she summons her wee neighbors to get in on the action. The horrendous hag flees to the basement while we're left dealing with the little lads, which really doesn't take us too long as these guys don't stand much of a chance at all with all of our upgrades. And naturally we go chasing after Ethel, since no one escapes Michelle's wrath, as long as you don't count the fights we ran from at the start of the video, but this goes doubly so for Ethel since she makes the mistake of trying to boss us around. Upon heading deeper in, we find some more of her friends which we promptly blow up. Once we get to the bottom, we use Shield of Thralls and a Scroll of Invisibility so that we can sneak in and free Mayrina to use as leverage. Thanks to our special eye, we can spot Ethel, and we use an Arrow of Darkness on the ground to hide in. Since that doesn't break our invisibility, we fire another one elsewhere on the ground right after so we can use the first one as a timer and know when to fire another one. The reason I did this was because at the time I didn't realize Darkness Arrows always last 3 turns, counting the turn you fired it, unless you combine 2 Darkness Arrows, in which case the new one expires at the same time as the first one. This led me to believe it was random, and I waste a whole lot of arrows during this fight because of it, but c'est la vie. Picking up, we use Perilous Stakes on Ethel, which also doesn't start the fight, and finally kick things off with a concentrated blast. The Swampish spellcaster splits off into a bunch of clones, and we get into the habit of ending our turn inside of a darkness cloud, which kinda just breaks the whole fight, since all of Ethel's spells are ranged and she can't target us while we're inside. It's pretty easy to spot which one is the real one thanks to Perilous Stakes still being on her, so with a whole bunch of darkness arrows and a near equal amount of concentrated blasts, we slowly but surely start whittling away at her, emphasis on the slowly part. Eventually we run out of arrows and resort to staving off one more turn with Sanctuary, but something's gotta give. So we head inside her room nearby and shut the door, only to learn that she can't actually get inside her own room, so I guess that's another way to take out this ferocious fae. With a few more blasts, she's reduced to under 30 HP, and when it gets back to her, she surrenders. She offers us a +1 to any ability score in exchange for letting her take Marina, and yeah, I mean, who cares about her? We take the bonus to Wisdom, bumping it up to an 18 and a +4 modifier. Now we've just got one last thing to do in this act. Time to show our kin what true power looks like. Michelle heads off to meet the leader of the Koresh, who tries to butter us up, but it's too little, too late. As we're about to show off our cool Rubik's Cube, our very own God Queen shows up, and since we can't usurp her just yet, we decide to play nice for now. She asks us to head inside the Astral Prism, as she calls it, and go beat up whoever's lurking inside, but when we get inside, my god, they're beautiful. I can't bring myself to kill them. Look at them, they're my dream girl. Well, now we've got an extra reason to slaughter everyone outside. We prep with the usual Resistance Shield of Thrall's Sanctuary, and our dream visitor also gives us a bless for this fight. After heading back out, the fight kicks off, and since our foes can't do much, we just cast Jump on ourselves and get into position. We head to the bridge outside and lure all the enemies there, and cast the Scroll of Mirror Image on ourselves just to be extra safe. Once our killable kin are outside, we hit the Inquisitor with a guaranteed Force Tunnel off the edge. Sucks to be him. And we get a repulsor on another dude, leaving only 3 sad sacks behind. They're decently easy to pick off, especially once we get stage fright on all 3 of them, and start triggering attacks of opportunity intentionally to make them take damage. And of course, we mix in our usual blasts as well. Our foolish foes get the odd hits in here and there, but thanks to guidance restoring our temp HP, we're never really worried, and they each go down with just a few blasts. Taking on the whole Koresh might be a little bit tough though. Thankfully, we find a cool hidden back door. And at the end of the hallway behind this door is a neat looking morning star, ripe for the yoinking. Unfortunately, taking it causes the narrator to say something very concerning. No need to worry though, we run through the convenient portal, down a potion of Featherfall, and jump to safety, just in time to watch the fireworks. It feels good to commit just a wee bit of mass murder at the end of the act. Despite yoinking the morning star, its holy nature seems to reject our wicked spirit, so we won't be able to use it going forward, even though it is extremely powerful. But with everyone that needed to be killed having been killed, and Michelle, Mind Freak, more powerful than ever before, we head towards the Shadow Curse lands where greater power and greater challenges alike await. As our terrible telepath prepares to enter the Shadow Curse lands, we figure with a name like that, it's probably a good idea to pull out a torch to keep the darkness at bay. And almost as soon as we enter, we spot some folks nearby, so as Michelle does before most fights, we cast Resistance and Shield of Thralls to make sure we're ready to come out swinging. We go lurk a little bit closer to them, but hey, what are the odds? They seem to know us. Well, at least our last name. Maybe they're interested in becoming our thralls, so we go say hi and oh my god, was that part of the plan? Goodness gracious, I guess not. The first fight of the act kicks off to a rocky start, with our allies getting clobbered a wee bit and Michelle getting clobbered a large bit. Thankfully, these slinking shadows are just as capable of getting their minds blasted as anything else, and we also whip out stage fright on a few of the baddies to help make them miss, before throwing a potion to heal up. The enemies do some more clobbering, even getting another strength drain on us, causing us to become heavily encumbered, and to top it off, start taking out our soon-to-be thralls for good. This gets us fuming, but first we've got to do some inventory management, which gets us fuming even more. Thankfully, with a resistance to give us temp HP, followed by a Call the Weak boosted concentrated blast, we managed to take out our first shadow. And as we'll be making a habit of whenever we're missing a decent chunk of health, we use our extra bonus action to heal up. Next round goes by peacefully, well, for us, and we keep up our lasting routine as soon as we can. Unfortunately, the last of our henchmen are taken out just a moment later, and we start taking some small hits too. With the amount of temp HP we get each turn and being able to cast Sanctuary whenever we need to get into a better spot, the enemies really can't do much to us though. So as long as we play our turns not completely foolishly, it's just a matter of time until Sea Blast takes out every single stinking shade. And Jonas too in the end. Maybe we'll find some thralls elsewhere. This lets us hit level 6 right out the gate, and level 3 in Cleric. This doesn't give us a ton past just more spell slots, including level 2 spell slots, but there's not a ton of level 2 spells that are particularly useful for us. Regardless, trust me when I say just having more spell slots is going to be such a huge deal for us, both for healing as well as being able to use Sanctuary more often. After all, we've got some long fights coming up. In our search for thralls, we head down the road and find an inn, and also a silly guard that thinks we need weapons to kill them. Ha! Oh no, I guess Jaheira didn't find that one nearly as funny as Michelle did, and she also seems to be under the impression we're a true soul just because we got a tadpole in our heads, and also maybe because we helped them massacre a druid grove. But when Oleg's lost, true soul Marcus vouches for us as he's managed to fool a lot of them, even convincing them we've met before and fought together. So, naturally, we throw him under the bus, kinda just to mess with him and also to prove ourselves the dominant mind destroyer. He does not take this well, and as initiative starts, he summons a bajillion little hands to come be a nuisance, and at the same time vanishes into thin air. The bajillion little hands don't stand much of a chance at all though, and also give us a sizable chunk of XP, so thanks for that, Marky Mark. Afterwards, we show Jaheira our cool space Rubik's Cube, and she decides we're cool enough to come live it up with them, a mistake she will soon regret. Before we make him regret it though, we head to everyone's second favorite last light vendor, Quartermaster Tally, where we buy the Cloak of Protection. This fantastic little item grants us +1 to our AC and all of our saving throws. Doesn't get much more simple or much better than that. This is going to be our cloak for the rest of the game. Then we head over to everyone's first favorite last light vendor. Oh, right. Scratch that. We have a quick chat with Jaheira and even manage to lie to her well under the effects of a truth serum. She tells us about Ketheric Thorm, a local immortal warlord who's serving the Absolute and thinks he's hot stuff. We'll have to show him who's really in charge. But first, let's head upstairs to talk to the resident cleric who can help us out with the Shadow Curse. Just in case she tries to hurt us instead, we throw on our usual pre-combat setup, complete with Sanctuary this time too. Instead, things go quite the opposite direction. She shows off some moon magic, foreshadows her near death in typical dramatic fashion, and gives us a blessing that prevents the lesser effects of the Shadow Curse, as well as grants us resistance to magical necrotic damage. And just as soon as we're done, Marky Mark shows up again and asks for our help kidnapping Isabel, and you know what? That sounds like fun. We're in. The fight kicks off and Marcus just kinda leaves. I don't know honestly, but we start blasting away at Isabel while our hellish henchwarriors take out Jaheira and the rest of the inn. Before you know it, they zoom back upstairs and manage to take out poor old Izzy too without much of a fight at all. This does, however, result in us being stuck outside surrounded by a million shadow-cursed undead as Marcus zooms off to go take his plunder back to HQ at Moonrise Towers. There's not much these fellas can really do to us since they're just weak little zombies, so we get a blast in to start thinning them down. We do also use Stage Fright to further weaken them and get some mass AoE damage going. And since we're using all our resources anyways, we drop a repulsor to speed things up as well. Regardless, it still takes quite a long time since there's so many of them and they average about 50 HP. Our current Call the Weak threshold is 12 too, and we're dealing around 10 damage per blast on average, meaning it takes about 4 blasts to take out each person. Not to mention some plants spawned halfway through the fight that are immune to psychic, which I mean, yeah, they're plants, I probably should have seen that one coming. So we just focus on taking out everyone here that can actually be damaged by us, and once that's all done, we flee from combat to get out of dodge. We do have to come back and very quietly sneak past the vision cones of all the plants though, just because we don't have any other waypoints in Act 2 quite yet. Our next destination is Moonrise Towers itself, where we will no doubt find more tadpoles to boost up our power level. And as we're heading there, we find a way to resist the more powerful parts of the Shadow Curse being carried by a big ol' half spider, half drow. What would you even call something like that? A spow? No, that's ridiculous. Anyways, we intimidate the fellow into giving us his shiny lantern, no problem, and then trick him and his entourage into thinking we've blessed them and they'll be protected anyways before sending them on their way. As they scream in the distance, we cackle evilly before taking a look at the lantern. Turns out there's a pixie trapped inside desperately wanting to be free, and mainly so we don't have to listen to her constantly, we give in. And momentarily enthrall her into giving us a trinket that protects us from the entirety of the curse. Thanks to this, we're able to pretty easily just saunter along the path and find Moonrise Towers. Inside the audience hall, we find Minthara being reprimanded for failing her mission, and seeing an opportunity, we use our malicious mental mastery to force her to admit guilt. Ketheric Thorm proves himself to be at least somewhat competent when he issues her punishment, especially so when he decides to take out her pathetic goons as well. And even though they don't take to that idea too kindly, not too kindly at all, he uses the chance to show off just how immortal and ruthless he is. Mr. Thorm heads off for a smoke break, and the rest of the goblins are ours to deal with, and boy do we deal with them, using a good old-fashioned force choke to take them out. Now that all that drama is out of the way, Moonrise is ours to explore. We mind control some gnolls to turn on their master, which goes exactly as we'd hoped, and we get a parasite out of it. Then we're off to the docks where we find a barrel with a couple more tadpoles inside, which we naturally yoink and fast travel out before we get caught in the act. We use these 3 specimens we got to unlock all remaining powers we can currently get at this point in the game: Charm, Luck of the Far realms, and ability drain. Charm is a reaction with unlimited uses that can be used after an enemy attacks us, and should they fail a wisdom save, which they'll have advantage on because we're in combat with them and it's a charm effect, they will be charmed until the start of their next turn. Basically, it's really bad and borderline useless, and I kept trying it for quite a while until I eventually decided to just turn it off in the reactions menu because it wasn't worth clicking away the pop-up. Luck of the Far Realms once per long rest lets us turn one successful attack into a critical hit. Normally pretty insane, but for now we can't make attack rolls, so literally useless unfortunately. And last of all, Ability Drain, a passive that triggers once per turn and reduces the ability score of whoever we hit with an attack based off the ability we use to make said attack. Once again, not bad to have normally, but currently useless for us. Either way, with these three, our Call the Weak threshold is now 15, which is phenomenal. Continuing on, we find Minthara in the prisons, who's currently being tortured, and as our final revenge for her trying to murder us in Act 1, we let her mind be completely wiped, making her become but a mindless shell. That'll teach you to cross Michelle, mind freak. After we're done with all of our Moonrise meandering, we get to have a talk with Zarel, Ketheric's first mate. She lets us know that Papa Thorm's favorite necromancer has gone off to the Thorm mausoleum in search of some sort of relic, and from the sounds of it, is in need of assistance. If it's important to Ketheric, that means it's prime material to mess with him, so we've got a destination in mind. Before we go picking any fights though, we head downstairs and buy the Fistbreaker Helm from Lantarv. This is replacing our Haste Helm and gives us a +1 to our spell save DC, which helps out our Illithid powers as well as +1 to initiative rolls, which isn't the biggest deal since we can always go into combat with Sanctuary active, but it's still a nice handy thing to have. A mausoleum with a powerful necromancer and it sounds a little rough for us right now, so before that we decide to assert our power over some weaker villains. As we're looking around for some folks to fight, we stumble upon our old friends we sent into the curse alongside the Drow Spider. Drider, maybe? No, that's just silly. One of them shoots us right off the bat, dealing a pretty hefty chunk of damage, but we kill him with a blast of our own in turn. And we quickly realize these guys can't dash for whatever reason, so we just spend our turns blasting folks and using our extra bonus action to dash and keep them at a distance. So long as we continue this strategy, they can't ever get close enough to do any damage to us, and we lure them over to Moonrise in the hopes that the folks there will help us out. They don't, but hey, it was a reasonable hope. All that means is that it takes a little bit longer, but in the end, the fight goes exactly as you'd expect it to. Since the city has been made a bit more walkable, we walk on over to the toll house where we meet Jaren Gothi Thorm, who very much so requires gold. So, kinda curious as to what would happen if we do, we just give her all of our gold. To which she responds by roasting us and then trying to murder us. So you know what, Jerry? You deserve what's about to happen to you. She does get a mean hit on us at the start of combat, but since her damage scales with how much gold we have, and as of 10 seconds ago we don't have any gold, she doesn't do much to us. When it gets to us, we disengage into a resistance concentrated blast combo on one of the floating skulls that follow Miss Thorm, dealing double damage since they're vulnerable to psychic. Then we head up onto the roof and wait for them to follow us so our plan can come to fruition. Unfortunately, we didn't put nearly as much distance between us and them as we should have, as all the skulls come up and start blasting away at us. We even fail a few saves, which results in us getting silenced and slowed. So when it's back to Michelle, we dash disengage in an attempt to get far enough away that the skulls dash, which doesn't work out on all of them as most still get their hits on us. Things start to look much better for us when we get a repulsor off right in the middle of them, which sends Jaren Gothi flying to the streets below, taking a whopping 373 falling damage and removing her from the fight. From there, we heal up and cast resistance and get ready to toast all these spectral skulls. They start hitting us with all their various pecks of damage, but it's become pretty clear that we can tank through their hits and heal up on our turn, which means it's time to fire up the Sea Blast machine. After no more than a couple hits on each of them, we head downstairs to show Garen Gothay why you don't mess with Michelle and finish up the encounter. Thankfully, we get our gold back and then some by taking this toll house for all it's worth. Feeling much more confident, we decide it's time to meet Balthazar and see if he's got some power-ups for us. For better or worse though, outside the mausoleum we bump into Raphael, who continues to patronize us as he tells us in his own way about an infernal interloper locked away inside. And as he asks us to slaughter said devil, I must admit, as much as Michelle loathes being bossed around, it would be fun to kill such a creature with just our mind. We note his request and continue on inside, solving the consequence-free puzzle that awaits us by just mashing away on the, by using our powerful mind to solve the harrowing contraption and then taking the elevator into the Sharn Gauntlet of Trials below. What awaits is yet another puzzle, which is easily solved by approaching directly from the east to avoid the invisible wall, followed up by pressing the button in the center. This allows us to head through a number of different pathways, and Michelle's craven instincts direct us towards this mushroom-laden path where we get the feeling an ambush awaits, and as such we down an elixir of vigilance and precast resistance before heading in. As the fight breaks out, it's really not that bad, just a lonesome cloaker that can never do enough damage to pierce through our temp HP in a meaningful way, so we get blasting and a blasting some more. In the end, it's just 10 or so rounds of this before our cloaked combatant is down for good, leaving the rest of the way open. Deeper in, we find a room with a few skeletons clacking around and make sure to do our pre-combat ritual yet again, minus Sanctuary. Turns out there's some pretty chill skeletons being controlled by Balthazar, who doesn't know we're here to usurp Ketheric, so we have a pretty calm chat. Until the whole place starts shaking while dark portals appear on the ground and hordes of undead dark justiciars pour out of nowhere. Another fight kicks off, and this one is an absolute doozy. There's loads of portals spawning loads of enemies, and even though we do start with a few allies, they don't go after the spawners, and we can't actually damage them since they're immune to psychic. This ends up being a bit of a problem, since there ends up being just under a billion bozos with around 50 HP each. If we punch those numbers into our calculator, we'll find it'll take us 80,000 rounds to do. Regardless, we give it an honest go and make a decent bit of progress before we get a little too close to an edge and learn the hard way these guys can in fact shove, which is honestly probably for the best. Instead of going through the full slog again, we head to the Mason's Guild in town, where we enter the basement, fight off a wrathful wraith, and head into a secret stash where we find a guaranteed scroll of knock. Then we head back to the fight, and this time use our scroll to pop open the door to the room where Balthazar is hiding out, causing him to join the fight. From here, we mostly just watch the fight between the two factions and fire off the odd blast in the crowd to help out poor Balthy. While the tactic does end up helping out a ton, the naughty necromancer is still pretty quickly brought to his knees. Guess there was a reason he was hiding. Either way, that saves us having to betray him ourselves. Unfortunately, now it's just up to Michelle. We start cutting away deeper into the gauntlet and blasting away as we do so. In just a few turns, we manage to lure our angry mob to a nearby cliff, this time with Sanctuary on just to make sure we don't get shoved, and put Force Tunnel to work on the big boss, sending him plummeting down to his mild inconvenience. We'll get them later. The remaining enemies do their best to get at us, but with our 23 AC, they are sorely lacking, and it's just a matter of time as we pick them all off very, very slowly. Michelle really doesn't like letting folks get away, so we also climb down to pick off the big fella, who's not much of a threat when he's by himself. As a sweet reward for our efforts, we hit level 7 and level 4 in Cleric, granting us more spell slots and a new cantrip for which we take light, since not only does it negatively affect a bunch of enemies in this act, but it also helps with this act just being hard to see in. And we also gain a feat. While there is a lot of great options, we ended up going with Heavy Armor Master, which increases our strength by 1 up to 12, which is nice, but more importantly, it also reduces all non-magical attack damage we take by 3 while wearing heavy armor. This boosts our survivability and makes our temp HP that we get each resistance cast that much stronger. And while Ketheric's bestie is no longer around to give us any power-ups, the vault near his room is still perfectly intact, and inside we find the Callous Glow Ring. This little trinket is our next long-term item and grants an additional 2 radiant damage against any creature in light. It's not a ton of damage in a vacuum, but my god is it great for us, since it's one of the only damage writers that works with Illithid powers, and is part of the reason why we took the light cantrip to begin with. Since we've got a bit more power, it's time to assert ourselves as the true rulers of this shadow-cursed town. We've taken out the taxman, now we're going after the village doctor. We head inside his house of healing and find him demonstrating his practice for some students on some poor sod. Now, we're not one to interrupt a good torture session, but when we get spotted and their attention turns to us, we gotta think fast. Michelle uses our gift of gab to convince the evil doctor to set his students on each other, only for him to turn his attention to us afterwards, and unfortunately, we don't have the stuff to convince the fellow to take himself out too, and a fight kicks off. Malice, and yes, that's really his name, immediately starts resurrecting his nurses, and we find out quickly this is a level 5 spell he can cast every turn, which means Psionic Backlash deals real good damage to him. A quick wicked plot forms in our heads. We take out the sister he brought back and swiftly run over to all their corpses and loot their weapons, which they normally use to buff the doctor as well as attack, basically rendering them useless. This makes it so the doctor is wasting his bonus action to essentially just take damage every turn. And so long as he has a sister to resurrect, we just focus on blasting him before distancing ourselves with a dash. We keep up this routine for a while, just dishing out damage with blasts and backlashes, though it does get made longer since some of the nurses can patch up their head honcho. Eventually, we get past his health threshold where he starts multi-attacking, and this can be a pretty scary series of blows if it does land. So we just make sure to kite a bit more carefully so that he's forced to dash instead of swinging. One such way we do this is by heading up these bookshelves to the balcony, since he can't actually go up that way and is forced to dash all the way around. Because of this fantastic plan and all these little tricks, Malice doesn't stand much of a chance, and we take him out with a Psionic Backlash, with his last nurse getting a classic Sea Blast. And throughout the whole fight, we took only a single point of damage thanks to our temp HP and damage reduction. Now there's just one last township tyrant to take out in a tussle, Thisibald Thorm. He is a bartender though, and nice enough to pour a straight up malicious drink and ask for our story. We pray to the only god we know will hear us, ourselves, and down his malodorous mead. Then we get storytelling with the help of thaumaturgy, and that goes just as well, surprisingly. Another drink gets down successfully, though that's less surprising, and Michelle is not looking too hot. But we get one more story out to distract us with a truly incredible hot streak of rolls, and finish off our little session with one more sip of this fetid brew, causing the bloated bartender to blow up. Not usually how we choose to blow people up. I was really expecting to have to spend 1,000 rounds blasting him, but hey, turns out Michelle is better with her words than she's given credit for. Since the town has been secured under our rule, we head back into the Gauntlet of Shar to finish up the trials that will let us find the relic Ketheric is looking for, the presumed source of his immortality. Starting with the soft step trial, we just need to make it to the end without getting spotted by roaming shadows, which really isn't too hard. We just hop over the traps, misty step through a window, then through the gate at the end, and grab the umbral gem awaiting us. After that is the self-same trial. That means we've got to beat up a clone of ourselves with our current gear and none of our qualms about harming others. So to get around part of the challenge, we strip ourselves clean before activating it. Then we creep up on the false mind freak with our gear back on and start blasting away. She tries to get us with a guiding bolt, but that only makes psionic backlash trigger, and all it takes after that is one more blast for us to win our next umbral gem. Last up is the Faith Leap trial. We just got to get to the other side by using an invisible pathway, or as we prefer to do it, use our jump spell to give us some mad hops and jump from statue platform to statue platform, making sure to jump down to the invisible path before the final hop, otherwise we get sent back to the start. And that's gem number 3. Unfortunately, we need 4 in total, and we've no idea where the last one is, but we catch sight of a cool looking cat and chase it into the dark, where we get ambushed by Jurgir, the fiendish figure Raphael had warned us about. He gives us a bit of a musical rendition that leaves our ears damaged and Michelle looking absolutely unimpressed, and then tries to murder us for not applauding, but Michelle ain't no pushover, especially since our precasted sanctuary makes it so all the enemies just have to stare at us for this first round. We spend a few rounds luring the kitty over to the edge, and get real impressed by its tentacles. How cool would it be if we could turn into that? Then we use a force tunnel to displace the displacer beast into the void. Jurgir hops down to avenge his very special cat. Seriously, do not look into the lore on their relationship. And we start blasting away at the Maragon who accompanied him. At around this point though, the awful Orthon starts to go invisible at the end of each of his turns, and our sea invisibility eye never reveals him. He just kinda stops making saves for it. We pick off a few of his goons while the rest of them are stuck standing about for some unknown reason, and the big Y keeps shooting away at us. Eventually, we try casting the sea invisibility spell using a scroll, but that makes literally no difference either, and since we can't see him, we can't damage him. Unfortunately, this means we've gotta let him live. We cast Sanctuary and just run up to his throne, where we yoink the last gem before running away and hitting the flee button. You win this one, Jurgi boy. After acquiring all 4 gems though, we now have the means to end Ketheric's immortality and become the new supreme force in these lands. Just to be safe, we still decide to have a bit of a training arc before we start all that. We go off and bully the local fauna, decimating the avian population, and do something very similar to the local flora as well, so that all fear the name Michelle Mind Freak. To ensure the birds and trees don't think we're picking on them unfairly, we also make a point to go after the local fish as well, leaving them in tatters just the same. Now that we've done a bit of training, we head to the center of town where a Sharan statue resides with a secret. Michelle pushes in the northern, then western, then eastern facing plaques to reveal a hidden passage underneath. Once inside, we get the chance to make a saving throw for each mental stat, and as we succeed them one by one, we get a +5 to those stats until our next long rest, which won't be for a while. With our mental capacity stronger than it's ever been before, we head back to the mausoleum where we use our gems to pop open the locked gate at the bottom. Then descend into the portal to the Shadowfell that awaits us. Time to find what's on the other side. And boy, is there something on the other side. A prison where a lone figure sits at the bottom, but no prison will ever be able to stop Michelle. Once there, we talk to the Night Song, who greets us by saying this, like, okay, if you're gonna act like that, we could just leave you here. After a bit of conversation though, the Night Song reveals not only is she the source of Papa Thorm's immortality, but she would also be in debt to us if we set her free. So we do just that, and Dame Aelin, the demigod daughter of Selûne, is reborn. And just like that, she's off to take out the ruler of this place on our behalf, but she definitely seems like she'll be needing some help, so we go to follow. We arrive at Moonrise and see it drenched in holy flames and blood, with even more people waiting for us inside, but we're far too wily and far too clever to take the front entrance. Instead, we head towards the eastern side, where we find some roots that let us climb upwards. And with a good few jumps, we continue to not only get higher, but circle around to the back of the tower, where we find an easily breakable wall that takes us right near the entrance of where Ketheric went on a smoke break all that time ago. We make sure to do our usual pre-combat setup before sauntering on up to the guards, one of which is our old friend Flaming Fist Marcus. Time to show him why he never should have summoned all those hands on us. Michelle starts by blasting one of the necromites, which barely survives, and we follow up with a repulsor, finishing off the one and hurting everyone else in the room. Marky Mark gets us with a good couple whacks, and the necromancer in the room blows us up with a fireball straight to the face, so we actually do take some damage. Since she also starts summoning some substandard skeletons, she makes herself priority number 1 for blasting, and we start using our potions to heal up so we don't die before we get to the real fights. With another round going by, we get banged up again pretty good, with even the necromites getting in on the action. But hold up for a second. That's an awful lot of damage for that attack to do despite magic necrotic resistance. Now, I didn't realize anything quite just yet, but keep that in mind. That's foreshadowing. The enemies spend the next couple rounds completely whiffing attacks, which takes a lot of the tension off, as we land a couple blasts on our fireball-slinging necromancer. Speaking of, she makes the mistake of trying to sling one when she's at low health, which results in a very satisfying call the weak. With her out of the way and Marcus out of channel divinity charges to boost his attack rolls, it's really not hard to blast down the remaining necromites and get into a complete slugfest with our flaming fist friend. Thankfully, when he's alone, his attacks only barely break our temp HP, so he's not a threat at all, and like most of our fights, it ends up being just a matter of time. Then we're up to the roof where we meet an enraged and befuddled Ketheric Thorm. He thinks he's hot stuff, but trust me, we're hotter, with not one incredible intimidation check, but 2, we put him in his place, and leave him quaking in his boots as he's forced to admit something that's music to our ears. But then Aelin shows up and ruins the fun for everyone, reigniting Thorm's pride and causing a fight to break out. Ketheric uses deadly orders on us, which gives all enemies attacking us advantage, but we also have Sanctuary up, so that doesn't do much. Susdera, on the other hand, lights up the fight with yet more fireballs towards Aelin. On our turn, we prioritize buffing our Divine Thrall with protection from evil and good, as well as a healing word, which also gives Bless for a couple turns. And boy does she prove her worth. She gets a beautiful first swing, and oh no, she got knocked prone by a shield bash, and then clobbered to death by the K-Man himself before she did anything else. Why do I even bother? Well, maybe it was just a fluke. Let's heal her up with a Cure Wounds and see if this time goes better. She does get an incredible opportunity attack, but then she falls prone to a shield bash again, and this time gets fireballed, looking like it might be on us. So, time to get blasting. We go after the big man since his deadly orders is by far the biggest nuisance at the moment, as well as get a nice stage fight on a lot of our enemies before running behind a pillar for hopeful cover. Aelin wakes up and immediately shoves a dude off the roof, and then gets instantly hit by the first attack against her, and she's down yet again, causing Ketheric to come up and frighten us with his sheer gravitas. All it takes to send him reeling, however, is one more good blast. Turns out our thrall is just as useless in cutscenes, as a big tentacle gets conjured by Thorm to whack her to the ground, and we finally get a second taste of tentacular teleportation as Thorm takes his night song imprisoned again and vanishes. If we get tentacles, are we gonna be able to teleport too? Either way, the fight picks up again, and without deadly orders, the necromites really struggle to hit us. Though Susdera certainly does not, with a massive fireball landing right on our face and taking us real low. Not wanting to tempt fate, we whip out the old Sanctuary and start using healing pots to fix ourselves back up. A couple turns later, when we're feeling much more up to snuff, we pull the heinous act of putting down Ketheric's dog with a blast. Afterwards, we retreat far enough away that most of the necromites have to spend their turns dashing towards us. This results in an absolutely beautiful pile of enemies for us to just move into and blow up with maybe the world's most satisfying repulsor. Then we blast the sole survivor, and when it goes down, every other necromite that was spawning but just standing around finally aggroes onto us. Regardless, they can't keep up with our survivability. Even if it does take a tedious amount of time to take him out, we still eventually get them all. It was bad enough letting Yrgir get away alive, and we are certainly not letting Ketheric do the same, which means it's time to jump into a big ol' fleshy pit. Michelle arrives in a Mind Flayer colony teeming with intellect devourers, aka walking bags of experience, so we get a blasting. There's quite a few packs of them roaming around the place, which is good news for us since most of them just take one blast to kill. Elsewhere in the colony, we find pods of Illithids and innocents alike waiting to be freed, but we don't need more competition, and we certainly can't pass up an opportunity to evaporate some innocents. So we purge the pods and send them all the way of the dodo. That finally gets us enough experience for a level 8 and level 5 in Cleric. Once again, this is a level where we don't gain a ton past spell slots, though we do gain access to level 3 spell slots as well, which are going to be key in the fight to come. Trust me. A level up isn't the only thing we're looking for in this colony. There's something else we need at the other side of this room packed with baddies. Not wanting to attract all their attention, we decide to down a potion of invisibility and creep our way across. Once we get across, we find a puzzle awaiting us. Thankfully, it connects to our parasite-riddled brain, and we're able to use our vast intellect and powers to solve it easy peasy, which opens up a door and lets us grab a disembodied brain in a jar. Hopping on over to a different part in the room, we also find the Resonance Stone, which is a regular old object that we can hold in our inventory, and it emits an aura called Steeped in Bliss. This gives everyone in the aura advantage on physical checks, disadvantage on all mental saves, and also vulnerability to psychic. It doesn't work on undead and constructs, so for now we send it to camp, but it is prone to bugging out and breaking, so fingers crossed it still works once we get to Act 3. Well, in the same spot, we plug the brain into a machine and have a brief chat where it tells us it can give us a new psionic technique if we kill it. And hey, that's a double whammy for us, so we do just that and get the Gith's Zerai Mind Barrier permanent boon, granting us advantage on any and all intelligence saving throws. A pretty simple effect, but hey, the best ones always are. Now we're finally ready to head to the depths. We descend and our parasite squirms and our stomach churns. It's showtime, do or die, what will almost undoubtedly be the hardest fight in the game. As we arrive, we lurk in the shadows and eavesdrop as we spot the other two chosen of the Absolute, Gortash and Orin. Turns out we've got it a little bit backwards. The Absolute, a giant elder brain, is in fact under their control, and this is all some wicked plot by the gods of the dead. Thankfully, the others get going and leave just Ketheric by himself. We'll get to the other two later. They've got it coming if they think they can outplot Michelle. With them gone, we prep with resistance, down a potion of invisibility, and sneak to the back of the room to free our thrall yet again. When we do, Ketheric starts yapping away, talking up a big game. We give him one last chance to surrender and admit we're the superior villain, but it just doesn't take, and our final fight breaks out. The big Thorm starts by using deadly orders on Aelin, and yeah, I mean she's not lasting long anyways, especially when the nearby Mind Flayer stuns her a half second later. Also, an enthralled Isabel is here, but she really isn't doing much but using the oft ineffective Sacred Flame against us. Since we're surrounded, we go for a repulsor in the hopes we can take out some intellect of ours as well as push the Mind Flayer into the pit. None of this works out unfortunately, as Mind Flayers are apparently immune to such antics. So we just get blasting since there's not much else we can do. Worth mentioning, Ketheric is spawning more and more necromites every turn while using deadly orders. Aelin gets dominated, which is actually kinda nice, since when we blast some more we top up our HP, and then a necromite spawning takes our pathetic thrall back down. The first part of this fight is mostly just intellect of ours missing us while we try and blast down the Mind Flayer. When said Flayer of Noggins levitates away, we use a stage fright on the amassing necromite horde to keep them at bay, and turn on the nearby cranial cronies to thin them down. In just a couple of rounds, we're able to blast down the irate Illithid and prove we've already got superior powers. Unfortunately, the necromites are getting a little out of hand, and with deadly orders, they're really starting to hurt. We try and focus on Isabel next, since she's kinda just annoying, and also start burning through our limited potion supply. By the time we do take her out, the skeleton stampede has gotten a little out of control. Since they each spawn with Armor Vagathus as of the most recent patch, it takes us 2 blasts for each one, and 1 spawns each turn, which means we've really got to take out Ketheric if we don't want to burn through all of our health potions. Each round is getting harder and harder to survive though, so we've got to do it fast. To make matters worse, the range of our blast is so terrible that we need to move onto the low ground to be able to hit him, which gives our foes a high ground boost on their attack rolls. That goes as well as you think it would. We use jump on a future turn to grant us a bit more mobility so we can actually maneuver to hit Papa Thorm, but things are getting dicey. Oh, and did I mention that Ketheric has armor that reduces all damage by 2, meaning he fully negates our Callous Glow Ring and further reduces Sea Blast damage too. Since we were hemorrhaging health potions far more than I thought we would at this point, I took a close look at the damage rolls and realized the Necromite's damage was not being reduced by our magical necrotic resistance nor our non-magical damage reduction from Heavy Armor Master. So that's not cool. In a Hail Mary, we used an Elixir of Necrotic Resistance in case that jogs something. And miracle of miracles, it actually works. Now we're in a much better spot. We get back to doing hit and runs on the big bad evil guy and finally manage to take him out, proving us superior once and for all. He starts yapping again with a prayer to his god, and you know what? If his god wants to help him, so be it. What's a bigger challenge for Michelle? Okay, can I take that back? Wanna go back to yapping? Okay, we've made it to phase 2 and there's a lot of necromites around. That might be a concern. Merkel starts by hitting us with the Gaze of the Dead, which deals a ton of damage and also frightens us, meaning we can't move. Then hits everyone in the arena while pulling them closer, including us. This is extra bad since he's got a Bone Chill aura, making healing impossible next to him, so we Misty Step scroll far away, heal up with a potion, and end our turn with resistance. Going forward, we'll make a point of doing that so it can help us meet his very high spell save DCs. We make the Frighten save next time, and the pull doesn't get us either, plus it is pretty helpful since it's thinning down the skeleton horde. From here, the game plan is simple. Blast him for reduced damage, since apparently he's still wearing Ketheric's armor, and then skedaddle away and hope we can out-heal the damage we take every turn. Soon we figure out we can blast him from right under his little elevated area, and if we stand right about here, his pull doesn't actually pull us thanks to these little finger bone things. Which means getting frightened is no longer a huge deal, since if we do, we can still heal without worry of getting pulled. To make things better, the Skeletal Sovereign finishes off most of his underlings the next turn. After quite a few turns of just sitting here and trading blows, he activates Merkel's Call, so we use Sanctuary to keep him away. His call lets his skeletons that he spawns each round sacrifice themselves to heal him for an absurd amount, and give him access to Finger of Death, a very powerful spell. Now, you might think it's impossible for us to win at this point, and normally you'd be right, but our Discord community did some testing. Specifically, user Damon realized if you survive enough rounds after Merkel starts munching, he just stops spawning more guys. So all we need to do is survive a bajillion turns of his AoE attack, which after our resistance and damage reduction deals an average average of 10 points of damage to us each round. Since we gain 8 temp HP by casting resistance every turn, so long as we keep up Sanctuary, we are pretty much in the clear. At round 58, we are finally done waiting him out and get back to blasting. Now it's just a damage race. He tanks our blasts, we take his Gaze of the Dead, and Call of the Damned. Round 82, we take him below half health. Round 90, we run out of potions and start using spell slots to heal ourselves with Healing Word. Round 99, we use our last 2nd level spell slot. 104, and our last 3rd level spell slot is gone. Round 106, and we slay the Apostle of Merkel with only our mind. Ha! Get mind flayed, bozo. Merkel's material form disintegrates to ashes. Aelin wakes up from her nap to kill steal, and we grab Kethric's shiny, important looking stone. As well as his armor, Reaper's Embrace. Besides just looking real cool, this 19 AC armor reduces all damage by 2, as we know, and has a toggleable passive to make us immune to being moved at the cost of having disadvantage on dex saves. It also has the Howl of the Dead cantrip attached to it, which we can't use due to our challenge run, but this armor is basically just a +1 to our AC. We get out of the stanky flesh pit, whereupon Dame Aelin offers to join our camp, and while we do like traveling alone, we may yet have use for her, so we acquiesce. Our crush that lives in our head rent-free rings us up for a quick hype session, and then we're hitting the road where we embark towards Baldur's Gate at last, in the hopes of becoming a true psionic master. Once on the road to Baldur's Gate, Michelle settles down for an evening to plot her eventual takeover when all of a sudden our beloved dream visitor calls for aid and some astral assailants appear out of a portal to attack us. They start by blasting us with attacks, causing our body to flail around, but we've been through worse. We just get up and cast Sanctuary before meandering on over to the portal over a couple turns as our enemies watch on. As we arrive on the other side, we see even more Gith trying their darndest to break through our dream visitor's defenses, and naturally we rush to our wondrous waifu's aid. Unfortunately, there's some folks in the way, so without much of a second thought, we jump into combat as they're in the midst of blowing up friendly intellect devourers. How peculiar. On our first turn, we immediately fall into our routine of resistance and then concentrated blasts to start ticking away at them. Our brainiac brawlers actually don't do too bad themselves with a couple of hits, but they get rumbled pretty fast in return. We do our usual as it gets back to us, as unfortunately with a couple of flurries of blows, these malicious monks take out our last 2 thralls, which means their attention turns to us, and we quickly find out that even when their blows do land, thanks to all our damage reduction, they really don't do much. So we get a sea blast away in peace, while they do pretty much nothing. This person even misses us 3 times in a row while prone. After a few turns, we get the first of these wannabes, and just a little while later, we get the next one too with no trouble. Before we move on to saving our dreamy nighttime visitor, we cast Light for our Cal's glow ring, heal up, drop a Sanctuary, and forget to cast resistance due to the hurry we find ourselves in. Regardless, when we arrive, we find a friendly and beautiful Mind Flayer that we feel a strange kinship to. Our suspicions are immediately confirmed when he reveals he is in fact our dream visitor, and this is his true form, and for better or worse, the tentacles are really doing it for Michelle. Anyways, with him looking like that, how can we refuse him help? As the fight begins, all of our foes immediately start laying into our intellect devourers, instantly killing all of them before any of us on Team Evil even get a turn. In retaliation, the Emperor, as our dream visitor is called, gets a beautiful Mind Blast on 2 of them, stunning them both, while we do a classic Sea Blast on another before heading towards an edge in the hopes that the goons follow us. They do, but first they drop a gnarly fireball right on our heads. The Emperor, on the other hand, wastes his turn dominating one of the enemies without realizing their Stillness of Mind feature will break them out of it at the start of their turn. We keep blasting bit by bit and also get a bit of healing from a potion, all while luring our enemies ever closer to the edge. Michelle even attracts the attention of yet another goon who keeps hitting us with a pushing attack, which might be scary since we're close to a ledge if it weren't for our Reaper's Embrace preventing us from being moved. It doesn't stop them from dealing a buttload of damage with it on a future turn though, which just means we gotta dust ourselves off with our channel divinity and then finagle ourselves into the perfect position for a repulsor that gets 2 of our 4 opponents down for the count. From here we're a lot less worried. The Emp does take some hits and continues to waste his domination, but we just heal up when we need and blast away. One more of the goons even gets lured over to the edge, and we get this one with a force tunnel, leaving just the head honcho. Admittedly, it does take a while to get them since they're resistant to psychic, but they simply don't deal enough damage by themselves, so eventually they get got. When the dust is settled, the Emperor tells us all about himself and his past, even from before he was a Mind Flayer, back when he was an adventurer like us, before he took a tadpole to the head. We also learn the imprisoned Gith here is Prince Orpheus, and it's his power that keeps us both from falling to the Absolute's control. We'll have to get our hands on that somehow. To top things off, we're also given an extra tasty looking tadpole that should evolve us even further, so bottoms up. Power surges through us, and in the words of the Emperor, we become exquisite. This allows us access to the outer ring of Illithid powers, and we immediately have enough tadpoles for all of them, and boy is there a lot of them, so let's do a bit of a rapid fire round. First up is Fly, a passive that lets us fly, forever, whenever, obviously insanely good. Then we've got Fracture Psyche, this lets us reduce AC by 1 for 5 turns if they fail a save, and if we kill them while it's active we get to use it again. Not great. Illithid Expertise is another passive that grants us expertise in persuasion, deception, and intimidation. We already have most of that though, but hey, it doesn't hurt. Next up is Psionic Dominance, which once per long rest lets us counter any spell cast with a level equal or lower than a proficiency bonus, which is pretty handy, though not crazy powerful. Black Hole, on the other hand, is both crazy and powerful. It is a massive AoE that guaranteed pulls every enemy towards its center and has a chance to slow them. It recharges on a short rest, but after you use it the first time, it says you can use it up to 5 more times. Now, I don't think that's quite accurate, because for me it seemed that you could use it as many times as you want in the next 5 turns, and with 2 bonus actions per turn, that can get a little out of hand. Mind Blast is another pretty good one, firing off a high psychic damage cone in front of us once per long rest with a chance to stun. What's not to love? Mind Sanctuary we never really use, though it once per long rest lets you make a small area for a few turns that lets folks use actions or bonus actions interchangeably. Freecast is a good one that I mostly just forget about. It's a toggleable passive once per long rest that lets you ignore any cost such as spell slots when using an ability. Really no reason not to use it, just need to remember that it exists. Absorb Intellect is a cool one that should an enemy fail their save once per short rest, we reduce their intelligence by 1 and heal for an additional 1d8 per turn it's active. That means by the time its 5 turns are up, we'll have healed for 120 HP and our enemy will be down 5 intelligence. Last up is Displacer Beast Shape, which lets us turn into a Displacer Beast once per long rest. With 3 attacks per turn and the killer bonus action, there's plenty of situations this little beastie will help us out. After that, we take a very bloody sleep, and when we awake, we grab our Resonance Stone, which does continue to work, and we hit the road to finally arrive in the city, where we're immediately beset upon by the most heinous creature in our journey so far. We tell her to bugger off, and hopefully that's the last we see of her. Unfortunately, as we continue our journey, we're stopped by yet another nuisance, a guard who insinuates that we're a refugee of all things. Michelle tells her to clear off lest she face a mad mind freak, which just results in her calling for backup. Well, no time like the present to test our new powers. One guy gets really scared and blows himself and us up, but for the most part it's clear these folks are just not gonna hurt us. So when it gets to us, we drop a stage fright on most of them and then turn into a Displacer Beast to at last make some sweet attack rolls, immediately taking one out and hurting another. Even with stage fright, we get absolutely wailed on, teaching us that our AC is just too low when transformed to tank this many attacks, and sending us back into Michelle form. So we go into defense mode with Absorb Intellect on the Steel Watcher to get some passive healing, as well as Shield of Thralls and Resistance. A surprising amount of hits land and break our shield, which stuns everyone, leaving them ripe for a black hole pull into a beautiful Mind Blast, shattering almost all of their poor little brains. Except for the Steel Watcher, who's immune to Psychic. That might be a problem. On our next turn, we finish off one of the goons before heading to the edge, where we plan on sending the Watcher to the rocky shore below. But then it just kinda dies. It took me a second to realize what happened, but it ran out of intelligence and just dropped dead, so that's that problem solved. The last fella gets taken out in just one blast from full health too, thanks to our absurd Call the Weak threshold. A little further down the road, yet another guard gets in Michelle's way, and this is just getting ridiculous. Sure, they've got a drawbridge, but we can fly, so that's exactly what we do, and no one really minds. Once inside Worm's Rock Fortress, we meet Lord Enver Gordhash, who doesn't seem to be getting along with Orin and asks us to kill her in exchange for us teaming up in order to rule the world. We're not blind to how beneficial this situation is to us, so we agree, though once the time is right, even Gordhash will bow before Michelle. He also lets us know we've got an imposter among our camp, so I guess Withers has some explaining to do. Either way, after watching his coronation, we head into the city proper at last, where we go straight for the Stormshore Tabernacle and speak to Vicar Humbletoes to buy the Reviving Hands. These make it so when we heal any creature, it gains resistance to physical damage, as well as also giving some various unimportant revival-based effects and a +1 to strength saves. The resistance is really nice though, especially given the amount of damage reduction that we have, keeping in mind it applies before damage reduction. So if we get hit by a 13 damage attack, we'll have it down to 6, then take 2 less from our armor, 1 less from our Defender Flail, and 3 less from Heavy Armor Master, making it so we actually take 0. Obviously insanely good, and will be replacing our Wondrous Gloves. It's made even better by us heading to Sorcerer's Sundries next and buying the Ring of Regeneration from Leroikin's Projection. This little trinket lets us heal 1d4 at the start of each of our turns, triggering our new gloves and also getting maxed out thanks to our Periaptive Wound Closure for even more insane tankiness. We'll be swapping out our Bless Ring for this one. Since we're here, we decide to head upstairs and have a chat with Leroikin himself, who as it turns out is interested in the Night Song. He's got a contract out for her capture, and since we're in desperate need of money, we let him know that we'll be coming back with her in tow. Before that though, his tower seems relatively unguarded, so we just fly down and start looting it for all it's worth. While looting, we grab some very valuable and very powerful thaumaturgic tomes, one of which, the Tharkiate Codex, curses us, but we're very easily able to fix that with a remove curse, granting us the Tharkiate Codex Blessing permanent buff. This little blessing grants us 20 temp HP at the end of each long rest for a nice little boost. Then we go off and sell our findings, leaving someone else to get cursed, but hey, withering away other people's souls is the best way to earn money, don't you know? Speaking of withered souls, we decide to go check in on the local carnies, and after negotiating our way inside, we find Boney of Stony and Boney's Creations, a local statue maker. If there ever was a tyrant worthy of a statue, it's Michelle, so for the low price of 5,000 gold, we order one shipped to our camp. This grants us another permanent boon in the form of Sweet Stone features, which is more or less just a permanent bless, granting an extra 1d4 bonus to both attack rolls and saving throws, a very powerful feature to have all the time. As we go to check out our new statue, we get a bit of a jump scare in the form of Yenna, who's begging us to let her stay. Still, we don't want this creature anywhere near us, so we tell her to leave, and she responds by threatening us? You're lucky the game won't let us murk you, kid. When we go to bed later that day, here she is yet again, unfortunately. Good lord, this is turning into a horror game. Oh, thank God it was just Orin. Whew, I was worried there was an actual child in our camp. She tells us if we don't kill Gortash for her, she'll get rid of the real child, and I mean, that's extra motivation for us to stay with old Gordy. Thankfully, after denying her, she disappears and we don't have to deal with that wretched disguise anymore. The next morning, we continue our spending spree by getting a long-awaited makeover. Now all shall tremble before Michelle. And we finish up by heading to Ferg Drogher in Rivington to buy the Hellrider longbow. We don't have proficiency with it, but we can still get its benefits. For us, that pretty much just means a +3 to initiative rolls and advantage on perception checks, which is better than the nothing that our current ranged weapon gives. Can never have too much money though, so we go tell Dame Aelin about Leroican and how she should really go see him, which she isn't too happy about. But she also seems to think we're on her side in all of this, so off she goes and we trail after. We roll up looking all fly to the Big L's crib, where we at last reveal our betrayal to the Night Song. She takes a moment to pray and we just kind of let her, causing a bunch of Moon Maiden groupies to show up and fight alongside her. As the fight kicks off, we learn the gimmicks of it pretty quickly. Each of the 260 health minions she summoned concentrate on a moving globe of invulnerability centered on Aelin. They also have a reaction that deals 12 to 144 radiant damage that can be used when we damage them, on top of dealing an extra 5d8 radiant damage on each of their regular attacks. Hoo boy. We start off by using a black hole to pull 2 of them off the edge, but they don't take any falling damage. Then we resistance and dash into the globe. Leroican's goons are, in a word, useless. They miss terribly, always, and Leroican himself doesn't really do anything either. Aelin, on the other hand, is smart enough to move us out of her globe on her turn, so it doesn't look like we'll be hiding in there. Her goons also start using banishing smites to immediately remove Leroican's ineffective elementals from the fight. In the hopes we can help our temporary allies hit, we use Fracture Psyche on one of the moon goons, but even that provokes the reaction, dealing an absurd amount of damage. So we just get blasting and heal ourselves that way, since they're always concentrating on Aelin's globe. Another round goes by mostly uneventfully, but on our turn we end up surrounded by 2 baddies, and needing something to give, we cast Sanctuary on ourselves before flying downstairs and pressing the security button to cause Leroican's turrets to appear. And they join on the side of Aelin. Why? Just why? Well, whatever. We just down an elixir of radiant resistance and call it a day. The elementals whack an invulnerable Night Song, Leroican launches a fireball and takes more damage in return than he deals, and we stare in confusion as our allies start to get finished off. We just take another turn in Sanctuary to heal up and watch more of our allies die, and then Leroican also just fireballs and somehow teleports below. I don't know what's happening. Seeing our not so magnificent mage down there gives us an idea though, and we try and go below, which removes us from the fight, and as we're trying to get back into it, he flies back up and then dies off camera in a comically short amount of time. We show up just in time to see our celestial combatant casting Sacred Flame on Leroican's corpse. Seriously, what is going on? The 0 health fire elemental shows up again to fight back before getting disintegrated. What? Michelle gets back into the fight with a stage fight on one of them as well as a blast on another, and Aelin just keeps hitting Leroican's corpse. And we realize the Moon Goon's attacks can be psionic backlashed for a ton of damage before blasting some more and healing. Our last buddy gets finished off, kinda. He's still standing there, I don't know anymore. When it gets back to us, we keep up our blasting, before using another Sanctuary to take a timeout, only to come back in with a Mind Blast on 2 of them that hits just 1, and a Sea Blast to further damage them. The fight continues to fall apart at the seams, however, as Aelin starts shooting a different corpse and the 0 health Earth Myrmidon starts dashing in place. Finally, I stop reeling from the strange events and think long enough to realize that if we provoke the attacks of opportunity from our foes before blasting them, they can't retaliate, which honestly kinda just solves the fight by itself. We also learn they can't reach us if we stand on this floating table, which means we could take them out this way, but we stick with opportunity attacks and then concentrated blast since we take less damage that way. Once a couple are nice and low, we transform into beast form to finish them both off, and then a few rounds later take out the last with a sea blast, leaving just Aelin, who as you can imagine does not do better now that all of her backup has been dealt with. With no one left to pay us in this room full of corpses, we fly down and use one of the buttons to teleport out of here before the turrets decide to start open firing. I don't even know what to say about that fight. Let's just pretend it was a fever dream and forget about it. Moving on, we've heard tell of some great secret beneath Worm's Rock, so we get investigating. And thanks to our heightened mind, we're able to quickly realize with a couple well-placed lightning arrows on these torches in the prison, we can reveal a hidden passageway. Inside, a statue asks us if we're worthy, and I mean, obviously we are, but still, before we can advance to the end, it needs us to prove that fact with a series of trials. First up is the Chamber of Courage. We just need to pick up a torch and not die for 4 rounds, which is made very trivial by Sanctuary for obvious reasons. The enemies just kinda stand around and growl, and before you know it, the first chamber is done. Next on our list is the Chamber of Strategy, in which we need to finish up a chess puzzle, but we know Michelle is quite the plotter, so with just a couple moves, that's another chamber solved. Inside the Chamber of Justice, we find quite the tricky conundrum. We get told a story about a thief and have to figure out what the just punishment is. Only problem is there's a cursed judge stopping us, so we start by removing the curse on them, and then after thinking real hard about what a just person would do in this situation, pass our judgment correctly, of course. Last is the Chamber of Insight. There's 3 folks inside with varyingly heinous ideas, and we need to kill the one with the most heinous, so we just murk the person with the most similar idea to ourselves. With that, the locked door to the basement opens up, and we get enough experience to hit level 9. Since we no longer need more spell slots, we decide to dip back into Rogue to hit level 4 and get a feat, which after a lot of deliberation, we settle on Shield Master. This grants a +2 bonus to dex saves while we have a shield, and if a spell forces us to make a dex save, we can use our reaction to half the damage on a failure or take no damage on a success. Shield Master is by no means a great feat, and I'm sure there were better options, but I figured it would fit our tanky theme, and something tells me it'll be handy in the very near future too. We also get a +4 to our proficiency bonus as a nice boost as well. Before we continue on too deep, we down an elixir of lightning resistance just to be safe due to all the lightning themed stuff in these tunnels. Just down the way we see a big old dragon corpse that I'm sure will stay dead, and past it we find the Helm of Baldur, which reveals the way out when we pick it up. This helmet lets us heal 2 more hit points at the start of each of our turns, grants crit and stun immunity, as well as a +1 to our AC and saving throws. All in all, very good, and will only get better for us later. Since we're here, we decide to go loot the dragon as well, and oh no, that was a mistake. Somehow it overpowers our freakish mental capacity and uses us like a puppet to speak. Turns out the Emperor is actually Baldur himself, founder of the city, alongside this dragon who was once his very close friend. Seems they had a falling out when our Illithid companion went all tentacly, which resulted in Onsur's, the dragon's, death. Now it's time for round 2, and we're acting as our man stand-in. The fight starts and there's a couple of water myrmidons that teleport towards us and don't do much else. We ignore them and get blasting on the dragon, who uses lightning breath on us and the elementals in return, as he always will. For some reason, our shield master didn't trigger though, and before you say it's not a spell, keep watching. Michelle also learns Steeped in Bliss doesn't work because he's undead, and he reduces all damage by 4, so we're gonna be here a while. To finish our turn, we use Stage Fright and recast Resistance. As the turns go on, the elementals start healing the meager damage we've actually done, so they've gotta go first. When we bait Onser into attacking the group of us, our shield master triggers this time. I was completely stumped what caused this at first, but eventually I realized it only triggers on successes for some reason. Either way, it does work, so at least there's that. And then with a Mind Blast, we finish off the malevolent Myrmidons and stun Onser. The rest of this fight is as straightforward as it gets. We use good old Concentrator Blast on him to deal a max of 14 damage, and he blasts us in turn with a lightning breath that we often block. Fast forward a million rounds and the deadly undead dragon takes to the skies to launch a super attack. Thankfully there's plenty of crystals all around the arena for us to hide behind, and we take no damage. Then we're back to the old slugfest. He can never actually deal enough damage to be a threat to us with his regular blasts, and when he takes to the skies again, we just fly into this corner in the secret exit, causing the blast to whiff. With him posing no real danger, it is, as most of our fights are, just a matter of time. So after, I kid you not, 111 rounds and an hour and 45 minutes of real life time of nothing but consecutive blasting, Onser finally falls. Good lord. After that ordeal, it's about time we kick back and take it easy, and as we're walking by the ocean side, we find good old eye-poking Volo about to get blown to pieces. Since he owes us a lifetime of servitude after what he did, we decide to interfere. As the enemies lay into us, it becomes immediately apparent most fights that rely on primarily primarily physical damage just aren't going to be a problem for us. We free Volo with a well-placed arrow, get them all grouped up with a black hole, and then obliterate most of them with a mind blast. It's not hard to clean up the rest of the fight from there. After that, our ocular obliterating orator is eager enough to head straight to our camp where he'll live out the rest of his days. Well, the beachside walk didn't work out, so we head to the pub, and the Emperor wants us to go investigate the basement. Okay. When we arrive in said basement, a bunch of our kin have already infiltrated, which means it's up to us to deal with them. This fight is a little more complicated than the last fight because they have portals that pour out goons, but we can just one-shot each of the portal manning fools, and then it becomes pretty much the same as the last fight. Though slightly longer since most of them resist our mind blast, but they still can't really hurt us and their spells never work either, which means it's time to get a blasting. As they quickly learn that Michelle's not trapped in here with them, they're trapped in here with her. The Emperor gets really happy with his hideout being cleared out, and we finally get that sweet unwinding that we wanted. Our meandering ain't done yet though. We wind up at the House of Grief, and with a name like that, it's just gotta be a Sharon front. Sure enough, when we indulge in their services, they try and out-mind freak us by reading our thoughts, and when we press the lady on it, she reveals our suspicions are correct. Unfortunately for them, there's only room for one evil goddess in this town, and it ain't Shar, so we swing by the Steelwatcher Foundry and grab one of their helmets to see through any magical darkness they might conjure up. Then we head back to the shadow-strewn Sharon shack and get a fightin'. Even though the odds look stacked against us, we can still one-shot the weaker members of the cultist cloister, and when we do get hit, it barely affects us thanks to an elixir of necrotic resistance. Just like our last couple fights, it gets pretty much entirely dealt with by another very satisfying black hole, followed up by a mind blast. A repulsor a couple turns later calls down a good chunk of the rest, then a displacer beast speeds up the fight even further with a sea blast that brings it home. Our rewards are threefold. First is Viconia's Walking Fortress, a +3 shield that gives advantage on saves against spells, makes spell attacks against us have disadvantage, and lets us use Reflective Shell, which bounces projectiles back to their source for a couple turns. It also has a special shield bash and warding bond, but those are useless for us. All in all, maybe the best shield in the game and makes us even tankier, not that we really need it at this point. Next reward is enough experience for level 10 and 6 in Cleric. Other than more spell slots and another channel divinity charge, we get Blessed Healer from our subclass, which makes it so when we heal with a spell, we regain an extra 2 plus the spell level's worth of HP. Funny thing though, for some reason this also works on the Helm of Baldur and the Ring of Regen, treating them as level 1 spells, meaning we now heal an extra 3 from each of them for a grand total of 12 HP per round. To make ourselves even more unkillable, we do some investigating and read about a mirror that steals and grants memories. Then we find said mirror just down the hall, and after only one check since we read about it first, we trade in a -2 in strength for a +2 in con. And despite the strength loss being fixable with a remove curse, the constitution gain is permanent. Now it's about time we get on track with dealing with Orin, starting by tracking down the presumably forgetful assassin that left this very convenient list of people he needs to murder in order to join Orin's cult. Michelle finds him just down the street in the midst of murdering. Unfortunately, he instantly bounces, and we're left cleaning up his cronies. Thankfully, the next time we find him, he's more willing to stand his ground, and another fight kicks off. Pretty funnily, he instantly paralyzes us and then proceeds to do nothing, which is a great indicator of what most enemies are capable of from here on out. But with another good mind blast, and then a few rounds of sea blast, this fight gets got. For our efforts, we get another handy note telling us where to go next, and a bag full of hands. At our next destination, we meet Saravok Anchev, the fella in charge of the murder tribunal for Baal's cult. He asks us to talk about how we murdered the folks whose hands we stole, and we easily enough lie our way through this conversation, whereupon he asks us to murder a celestial in exchange for joining a cult, and while the only god we want to serve is ourselves, it's hard to pass up murdering a celestial. So we become an unholy assassin and gain access to the temple where Orin is hiding. Michelle finally remembers aid exists and adds that to our usual prep before facing her, and arrive just in time to see her taking out the kid she napped, which definitely has us wanting to jump into a "you and I are alike" monologue, but instead we jump into a fight. Before we can properly hurt Orin, we have to stop the ritual her followers are performing to give her 12 stacks of unstoppable every turn, which means we start black holing them off the edge. Orin can deal good damage if she knocks us prone, but thankfully that's pretty unlikely and doesn't happen often. Most of the time she just doesn't do much. Our black hole manages to get most of the ritual casters, but for whatever reason refuses to knock these two off the edge, so we get one with a repulsor and the other one with a force tunnel. This does stop the ritual, but it means we have no way to knock Orin down into the pit, so we've got to do this the long way. It is pretty funny to watch the Sisyphean struggle that our squirrely stabber goes through as they try and hurt us. Eventually, we do finally blast her to bits, quite literally in this case, and grab her nether stone, and this time it only took 43 rounds. Now it's time to tell Gordy the good news. He's stoked to hear it, but also tries to intimidate us into handing them over. When we refuse, he reveals that he was just being a wily little prankster and yanking our chain, before heading off to the sewers to await our arrival. We could go deal with all that right now, but there's still some other folks in town claiming to be the ultimate villain, and we need to prove them wrong. Starting with Cazador Sar, a lord who's totally not a vampire, but just has a penchant for red and black and skulls and bats. To get to him, we've got to make it through this big old scary door, but as we arrive, we first hit level 11 by blasting the closest bystander. This grants us level 7 in Cleric, which means we get 4th level spells, including Death Ward. This makes it so the first time we get reduced to 0 hit points while it's active, we instead drop to 1, as a nice little last resort. To make it through the big old door, we first read a dead dame's dictionary, and then steal a family crest off a fogey at rest. When we do open it, we meet a werewolf who makes the same mistake many of Michelle's victims have, trying to tell us what we can't do. I'm sure you can guess how that one ends up going for him. Upon descending into the basement, we find some imprisoned vampire spawn who beg us to save them, yet at the same time doubt our abilities to take Cazador's staff to do just that, but we'll show them. In addition to the usual prep, we also drop a protection from poison and necrotic resistance elixir on ourselves just to be safe. Then we head to chat with Cazador, who is very excited to show us his ascension ritual in action, which naturally we aren't gonna let succeed. It's easy enough to stop by heading straight over to the weakest link, some random level 1 vampire spawn named Asterion, and instantly disintegrating him. Then we pick up the ashes, stuff it in our handbag, and ship it off to camp with same-day delivery. While it does stop Cazador from ascending, for some reason he's still getting the benefits as if Asterion is still there, which kinda blows because for each ritual source he deals an extra d10 necrotic damage and gains more temp HP. Chatterteeth, one of the goons, tries to put us to sleep, which we resist and use psionic backlash in return. But that just means we've got to focus on taking him out, as we mind blast before sea blasting the chattering man himself. Cazador also starts using Call Lightning on us, which is the only real way we take damage, but it's never enough for us to actually worry. In the midst of bullying the skeletal spellcaster, we get a good repulsor taking out most of the goons, learn Mage Hand can stand on the ritual source to block it, and Stage Fright thanks to the extra bonus action from Asterian's source. On one of our turns, we also start using black holes to fling enemies off the convenient edge, and in the process learn that whenever we stand back on Asterian's source, it gives us yet another bonus action, seemingly infinitely. There's no fun in abusing that, though it is nice to know about, so we just kill Chatterteeth the old-fashioned way. With him out of the way, we also decide to take care of the rest of the goons so the turns go by a little bit faster. Now it's time to start trading blows with Cazador himself, who only does things every other turn, giving us more than enough time for our passive healing to keep us topped up, combined with Sea Blast healing. Odd behavior for sure, but I'm not one to look a gift Cazador in the mouth. Fast forward to the 47th round, and we make Cazador sorry that he ever messed with us. We use our favorite Illithid power, a dagger to the heart, to finish him off, and just to spite the losers stuck in that cage who said we'd never get his staff, we break it, trapping them to an eternity of ravenous torment. Sucks to suck. Mr. Sar wasn't the only big villain in town. We hear Raphael occasionally makes this place a stomping grounds, and if there ever was someone who needs to get knocked down a peg, it's him, so we set off to the Devil's Fee, and find exactly what we were hoping to find by breaking in upstairs, a magic circle for conjuring up a portal to the 9 hells, complete with all the ingredients we need to make it work. All it takes is a little trial and error. We jump on through the portal and arrive in Raphael's domain, the House of Hope, where we're greeted by Hope, seemingly the embodiment of the concept, so we know she's gotta go before we're through with this place. She asks us to free her from Raphael's torture, and we tell her we'll get right on that, in exchange for a disguise and access to the house, which she happily grants. As we get exploring the house, we find ourselves in the archive, where we meet the archivist, who is more than happy to ramble about all of Raffi's most beloved belongings, mentioning something called the Orphic Hammer being his most prized, which is reason enough for us to steal that on our way out too. It's got a barrier around it right now, but that doesn't mean we can't steal the other couple artifacts lying about, which does admittedly break our disguise and alert the master of the house, but we're not the ones who should be frightened. When we step outside of the room, the other denizens engage us, including including a giant ball of hellfire which has 250 HP, ignores resistance and immunity, and is immune to psychic damage. Okay, maybe we should be the ones afraid. Michelle starts blasting the folks that we can damage, and we immediately fly away from the ball, which makes a whole other horde angry at us. Thankfully, this horde doesn't really have their hearts in it, with the Cambion Harlep just snarling at us because he can't deal enough damage to hurt us, and all of the many imps spending their turns missing every single shot. Some folks also start blowing up on us. Well, Baal, god of murder, approaches ever closer. On our next turn, we give Mole a bit of stage fright since they're already missing, and it works better than expected since for some reason their agonizing blast damage is hurting themselves. Unfortunately, they also reflect radiant damage back doubled and as fire on the first instance of taking it. I didn't realize it was only on the first time though, and kinda panicked and took off our Callous Glow Ring for the rest of the fight, even though, let's be real, we're nowhere close to dying. Either way, a killer repulsor takes out all the injured imps, and so long as we can deal with this ball, maybe with a Displacer Beast, we should be good. While keeping our foes at bay with black holes and thinning them down with blasts, we end up heading inside the boudoir, where thankfully the ball can't get us in the bath, which at the very least solves the problem temporarily. We get the last of the ineffective imps as well as the cowardly Cambion, before realizing we used our Displacer Beast form in the werewolf fight earlier. Uh-oh. The ball continues to stare us down as we try and think of what to do, when all of a sudden a ploy occurs to us. To start, we use a potion of angelic reprieve to take a quick power nap in the bath and get a short rest. Don't do that at home. Then we lure the ball over to the balcony and use our refreshed black hole to make it rain down on some poor sod far below. And conveniently enough, inside the boudoir are some taps that give us a long rest with just a click of a button. Also inside this room is a button that reveals a hidden safe, and inside the safe a letter that reveals the magic password to grab the Orphic Hammer. The second we leave the room, a haunting and rotund figure appears behind us yet again. We flee back towards the balcony and with another black hole continue ruining whoever's below this ledge's day. As we clean up the rest of the house, we get enough experience for our final level up. Level 12 and level 8 in Cleric grants us more HP, more spell slots, more radiant damage on melee attacks, and our final feat, Tough. It's a simple feat that grants us an extra 2 max HP for every level that we have, basically just granting another 24 max, making us super duper extra tanky. Now that we're in peak form, we head back to the archive and grab the Orphic Hammer so that we can free Hope and make Rafi extra mad after taking out her guards, which thanks to the Displacer Beast form goes pretty quick. With one whack here and another whack there, Hope gets freed nice and fast. Since we know Hope isn't gonna last through what's coming, we also get her to conjure up a chest full of goodies for us beforehand, and then with our usual setup and an elixir of heroism, we go to exit the house. Surprise, surprise, as we go to leave, Raphael appears, along with a 40 health dwarf who is very outclassed and our old game-breaking nemesis, Yrgir. The head honcho proves himself to be a little more relatable than expected with his initial ranting. Yrgir throws away his last chance for survival, and the much-anticipated assault kicks off. Hope immediately gets cooked, literally in this case, and Raphael is very proud about the fact he killed her despite him seemingly previously wanting to keep her alive, I don't know. On our first turn, we immediately start leaving the room while our sanctuary is still active, hoping everyone will follow. Raphael is a little stubborn, choosing to hang out in this corner instead, but everyone else trails out of the room. It was admittedly unexpected that he'd stand there doing nothing, but we don't take it for granted and start blasting at the fools who followed us out. Gorilla dies from full health with us just kinda glancing at her, while the others fail to do much of anything to us. We get a mean black hole mind blast combo to speed things up before blasting down the weaker ones. Oh, and Yrgir is also here, doing not much. A dozen or so rounds later, and basically every single goon is dealt with, while we still have full health. Michelle tries to finish off a Yrgir who does get revealed by our eye this time with a force tunnel into a pit. Unfortunately, he refuses to go anywhere. This does, however, anger Raphael enough to come out of hiding, which is just what we were hoping for. We fly back inside the main chamber where a couple little dudes Raphael had summoned are waiting for us. Either way, we shut the door and use a scroll of arcane lock to buy us 10 turns of freedom inside this cozy little room, which means it's time to start wreaking havoc as a Displacer Beast, and since Raph was nice enough to leave behind some goons, we also down a Bloodlust elixir, letting us on the following turns use them as fodder to give us an extra action, before eradicating each and every pillar that Raphael fuels his power with, making him in the end a weak little devilman crybaby. Once we're through, we re-drink an elixir of heroism, and since we've got just enough time left on arcane lock, we also use a potion of angelic slumber to both disrespect our foul foes and gain the benefits of a long rest. As we open up the doors to a very sad master of hell, Yrgir decides he no longer wants to be visible, which is fair, and stops making saves against our invisibility seeing eye, which is not fair. We try and use black holes to yeet him off the edge to no avail, and as such are left tanking hits from both the big man and the cheating Orthon, which stings quite a bit. In retaliation, we use Mind Blast to stun him, and go for one last Hail Mary black hole, which doesn't work out. And another debtor that had been summoned turns into an imp on top of us, so we teach him a lesson in manners, and drop a reflective shell for extra safety. Good thing we did too, cause our narcissistic enemy burns through his soul charges only to damage himself. With Yrgir hiding away, we don't have much of a choice but to start blasting at Raphael, who makes it clear how little he enjoys that. It's nothing a good healing potion can't fix though, along with a black hole mixed in every turn to slow, which does cause the big boss to waste his turn jumping. On the rare occasions the Orthon doesn't use invisibility, we continue going out of our way to blast him. And now that we've burned through all of Rafi's soul charges, he's stuck melee attacking us, which means we've become immortal once again. Michelle's next turn is spent with a repulsor to reveal Yrgi, as well as a sea blast barely not finishing him off. So we go back to blasting the dastardly devil for a small eternity while we wait for his underling to slip up. Eventually, slip up he does, by wasting his bonus action jumping, granting us our ultimate vengeance against the one that got away. About another 40 or so rounds of this happening goes by before his master joins him in the pit alongside his hope. Imagine thinking you can out-villain Michelle. Ha! Besides absolute dominance, our reward for this fight is the Helldusk armor. This 21 AC armor grants resistance to fire damage, immunity to being burned, reduces all damage by 3, grants the ability to fly alongside automatic proficiency, and when we succeed a saving throw, the caster receives burning for 3 turns. This is technically non-Illithid damage, but is pretty minimal, and after beating the hardest fight in the game on our first try, I really wanted to see just how absurd our survivability could go. In case you were curious, this puts us up to 27 AC. Since we've done all we need to do, it's time to become a god for real, and wrangle the Netherbrain under our control. We meet up with Gordy, who is freaking out. It's our last chance to get things under control, but the Netherbrain appears bigger than ever before, and pulls us into its psyche, where it reveals this was all part of its master plan, as it has grown strong enough to resist the Netherstones. Despite our best efforts, it resists our overwhelming power, causing Gort to steal our Netherstones, and I think it's time to betray him after— oh, wait, never mind. Thanks, Netherbrain. Right before it can do the same to us, our tentacled husbando shows up and whisks us to safety. While we're stuck recuperating and replanning, the Netherbrain enacts its hostile takeover. The Emperor reveals to us that in order to defeat it, it must be an Illithid that wields the Netherstones. We happily agree to turn into one and at last achieve our ultimate form. All shall fear Michelle Mindfreak. And to make things better, we get a nice morning snack too. With our transformation, all our powers get upgraded along with unlocking some new ones, but there's too many changes to go over right now, so you'll just have to see them in action. We arrive just in time to group up with our many allies and give a rousing speech, and yes, this is really how the scene plays out. I didn't change a thing. Also, don't ask why our tentacles are so, rigid. Then we saunter towards the Netherbrain's army with the Emperor in tow. No need to be smart at this point, especially when we can wipe out half of them with a single black hole now that it damages. The rest of this fight is likewise explosive, and there's no breaks for us since our actions and bonus actions are interchangeable now too, on top of our Sea Blast no longer requiring concentration and dealing loads of damage. Now that the army is cleared, we've got to climb towards the Netherbrain before it's too late, while a Nautiloid rains fire down on us. Good thing we can fly. Sure doesn't make this part a whole lot easier. Yet for some reason, we still physically climb the brainstalk. Never too late to get some cardio in, I suppose. Unfortunately, as we reach the top, a dragon shows up alongside a bunch of Illithids to bar the way. These Illithids are nothing compared to us though, and we obliterate them with just a couple black holes and sea blasts. The dragon can't even damage us thanks to Shieldmaster, and crumbles in the face of Mind Blast every turn, along with more overpowered sea blasts. Once everything is clear, we use the Netherstones to reopen the portal to its psyche, where we can weaken it for real. As we arrive inside, we toss the resonant stone so the aura only affects the Netherbrain. Then we get the Emperor to use a Globe of Invulnerability scroll, which apparently catches the brain bozo inside of it. Could've fooled me. On our next turn, we just cast it a bit further back so it only affects us, and the platforms we're standing on. Then we also use a speed potion, as well as Fierce Perilous Stakes on ourselves to expand our crit range and grant extra psychic damage on each attack, and turn into a Displacer Beast. We start swinging and get mind broken, which basically means we don't get a multi-attack, but we've got the Emperor with us too to Sea Blast away. The mind breaking keeps up on sequential turns, but we really don't need lots of attacks to bring the brain nice and low. And once we've got it right where we want it, Michelle goes back to Illithid form so we can finish off the brain with one last concentrated blast, for old time's sake, proving once and for all we are the peak of psychic power. With our dominance proven, the nether brain surrenders, begging for us to wield its power and spare its life, and boy do we love it when they beg. We use our strength to take control of it and ascend to our rightful throne, where no one will dare defy us again, as our power becomes at last absolute.
In my name.
Thank you guys for watching. As always, here's the stats for the whole playthrough. I hope you enjoyed Michelle's feature-length journey. Stay tuned for Act 1 of the Warlock playthrough coming out soon. As always, a very special thanks to our Storyteller tier members, Bunny Warren, Player 5, Damon, Larry Renzokukin, The Big Yeet, LaFay, Mark Rainbow, Garrett Sapp, and Rat King.